Chapter 572. Military Governor scanned the instance dungeon tree. Guhan could only enter 4 instance dungeons at the moment. Among the 4 instance dungeons, 3 of the records had already been raised to the limit. Although Guhan was confident that he could break the records, luck and teammates played a big part in it. Guhan did not think that he could break the records in a short period of time. That was why Guhan had no choice but to choose the only solo instance dungeon out of the 4. It was also the instance dungeon that Guhan felt had a lot of room for improvement, the Great Search of Wuhan. If Guhan had a choice, he would never enter the instance dungeon of his own accord. Once he entered the instance dungeon and saw that once innocent face, Guhan would feel that he was worse than a pig or a dog. The Great Search of Wuhan, as the name suggested, was an instance dungeon that involved searching and battling in Wuhan. It did not seem like there was anything that was worth Guhan's attention. However, if everyone knew the timeline of the instance dungeon, they would probably not think so. The instance dungeon would take place 6 days after the apocalypse. Let me remind everyone that the starting instance dungeon of Sword Maiden Online, King Yu Gojian, also took place in Wuhan. Do you understand? The Wuhan Great Search Instance Dungeon was actually the sequel to the King of Yu, Gojian. It took place the day after the King of Yu, Gojian. The main character of the story was none other than the Great Sword Ancestor, Fleeting Calendar, who was stabbed to death by Guhan in the game. Guhan had already broken free from the extremely dark situation he was in 2 months ago. Guhan had once thought that as long as he could obtain strength, it would be natural for him to stab Kanzu to death. Now that he thought about it, he would despise himself. However, Guhan had never regretted his choice. If he did not make this choice, how could he be where he was now? Everything in the world had its own destiny. After all, this was just a game. However, Guhan did not want to face Fleeting Calendar. He did not want to see Kanzu's once kind and pure face. However, in order to contact Lu Lei, Guhan had no choice but to enter the instance dungeon. System notification. Player Military Governor, welcome to the Wuhan Great Search Instance Dungeon. Objective: protect and accompany Fleeting Year Calendar as he searches for survivors in Wuhan City. The basic objective is to complete the quest with 100 survivors. The more survivors you search for within 8 hours, the higher the score. System notification. Quest 1 has been updated. Kanzu's whereabouts. You are now at the location of the former Water Caltrip Lake Wanda Center in Wuhan City. Please find the Kanzu calendar that is currently around the Wuhan Museum. According to historical records, after the Fleeting Year calendar synchronized with the Yu King Gojian, the Virgin Mary's heart began to act up. She began to search for other survivors in WH City and attempted to establish a survivor camp. The first day of the Fleeting Year calendar was spent searching for survivors in Wuhan City. As a player, Guhan joined the Fleeting Year calendar's team and helped it find more than 100 survivors. This was a very simple quest. Even if you were trash, as long as you followed the Fleeting Year calendar and listened to its commands, even if you didn't kill a single monster, you would still be able to complete the quest. If you wanted to get a high score, you had to search and find as many survivors as possible within 8 hours. Generally speaking, as long as you found more than 300 people, you would get an S rating. Finding more than 400 people would get an SS rating. Finding more than 500 people would get an SSS rating. The current record was set by a player named Zhang Yi. He had saved a total of 621 survivors in 8 hours. This record had been kept for almost 30 years. In order to find a way to break through the Sword of the Yu King, Guhan had tried to find clues from other instance dungeons related to the Fleeting Year calendar. This instance dungeon right after the Sword of the Yu King naturally caught Guhan's attention. The reason why Guhan felt that there was a possibility of breaking this record was because according to the information Guhan had obtained from the dungeon, there should be 650 survivors that could be found within 8 hours. The key was how to get these survivors to follow the fleeting year calendar and listen to his command. During the apocalypse, the human heart was very complicated. There were many people with strange thoughts. Some of them didn't believe in the fleeting year calendar and were unwilling to join the fleeting year calendar's team. Some of them wanted to leave after joining the fleeting year calendar and find their own safety. There were even some who wanted to kill the fleeting year calendar and steal the sword of the Yu-King. In short, besides finding people, the key to this quest was to control the human heart. Over the years, there were many players who tried to break this record. Unfortunately, the human heart was hard to predict. If they weren't careful, many people would die. As a result, no one had succeeded in breaking this record for the past 30 years. But on the other hand, as long as the human heart was well controlled, this record was not out of reach. Gohan's current location was near the once bustling Wanda Plaza. Half of the Wanda Plaza had been destroyed, and only the Wanda Cinema remained standing. Dear readers, please put yourselves in my shoes. If you were a player who had just entered this dungeon, what would you do? I believe that most players would not hesitate to follow the system's instructions and go to the Wuhan Museum to find the fleeting year calendar and meet up with him. If that was the case, then everyone would have missed out on a large number of survivors. According to the information, there were still 30 survivors in the Wanda Cinema. If they didn't bring these 30 people along and instead went to find the fleeting year calendar, then in another 10 minutes, there would be a fight between the survivors in the Wanda Cinema. Only half of the 30 people would survive. Moreover, it would attract the attention of Yuan Ko, and the final outcome would be that all the survivors would be wiped out. If these 30 survivors all died, then the goal of surpassing 621 people would be impossible. Because the total number of people was only 650, Gohan had to bring these 30 survivors out. At this moment, in the 4th floor of the Wanda Cinema, in the smallest VIP hall, almost all of the 30 survivors were in this hall. They sat on the chairs in the cinema, hugging their arms and shivering. They had already stayed in this hall for 5 to 6 days. At the beginning, they relied on some of the food in the VIP hall. On the second day, they risked their lives to leave the VIP hall and bring back all the food and popcorn. After eating for another 2 days, they had not eaten anything for 3 whole days. Although it was autumn, and it wasn't very cold, their bodies were severely lacking in sugar, and their body's ability to maintain heat had also decreased. The cold caused by hunger caused them to shiver. Of course, hunger was only part of the reason. The more important reason was the fear in their hearts. All of them understood that if they continued to stay here, even if they weren't killed by the monsters, they would still starve to death. They had to find a way to leave this place and find food. F***ck you trash, stand up. Suddenly, a fierce-looking guy with a bald head and a body full of all kinds of strange patterns stood up from the comfortable leather chair. At first glance, it was obvious that he was a big bully. Behind him, a few of his equally fierce subordinates also stood up. This big bully was called Wan Chao, and he was the leader of the bullies in this area. He was in charge of the businesses of dozens of places nearby. He was also a bully who climbed up step by step from a young age. 6 days ago, he brought his 3 subordinates to find trouble with the manager of this cinema, because the manager had slept with his brother's girlfriend. In the end, before they could find the manager, they encountered Yuan Ko's invasion. Wan Chao was very smart. When he saw that the hall had been invaded by Yuan Ko, he immediately rushed into the VIP hall with the tightest door. After entering the VIP hall, Wan Chao did not say anything and immediately closed the door of the VIP hall. Then, he blocked all the things he could find inside the door, completely sealing the door of the VIP hall. At that time, there were 24 guests in the VIP hall watching the latest movie, The Avengers 9. There were also 2 service staff. They were all shocked by Wan Chao's sudden appearance. At first, when Wan Chao said that there was a monster invasion, these people thought that Wan Chao was crazy, saying that he couldn't distinguish between movies and reality. However, when Wan Chao grabbed a few people's heads and crawled to the only glass window in the VIP hall, through the glass window, they saw a scene of broken limbs and blood on the ground outside. Only then did these people completely believe Wan Chao's word. Relying on the fear brought about by this incident, as well as the deterrent ability of Wan Chao's 3 subordinates, and Wan Chao's response at that time, Wan Chao established his prestige among these 30 people. He successfully became the manager and leader of these 30 people. However, this position of manager and leader could collapse at any time. Although Wan Chao was smart at the critical moment, he was still a lawless bully, especially since he was very lustful. He would not be happy without a woman every night. Therefore, on the first night after the apocalypse, he set his eyes on the 2 unlucky waitresses. In public, he raped the 2 waitresses under the screen. Then, he threw the 2 waitresses to his 3 subordinate. In the cinema, under the movie screen, under the eyes of everyone, the 4 of them had a great time together. This gave Wan Chao an extremely perverted sense of pleasure. Therefore, on the 2nd day, the 3rd day, the 4th day, and even just now, Wan Chao, who had nothing to do in the VIP hall all day, had already raped all the women in the VIP hall. These women were not lonely and friendless like the 2 waitresses. Their husbands, relatives, and friends were all in the VIP hall. If it weren't for Wan Chao's murderous aura, the entire VIP hall would have exploded. Their loved ones being raped, hunger, a hopeless future, all kinds of emotions intertwined together, forming a bomb that could explode at any time. And the source of this bomb, Wan Chao and others did not know. Or, even if he knew, he would not have the mood to care about these things. Anyway, there was no hope of survival, so it was better to have fun before dying. It seemed that what Wan Chao was going to say next would ignite the emotions of the entire VIP hall. Chapter 573. If we want to live, we must find food. This was Wan Chao's first sentence. This sentence was reasonable, so it didn't cause the crowd to resist. But when Wan Chao said the second sentence, the whole scene went out of control. You. The few of you leave here, go to the supermarket downstairs and find enough food. It was this sentence that completely ignited everyone's emotions. Wan Chao called out a total of 10 people. These 10 people were all men, and all of them had relatives or friends who stayed here. Wan Chao's idea was very simple. As long as their relatives were here, these men would not run away, and would obediently bring food back. But Wan Chao underestimated the courage of these people. Since these people saw their women being defiled by Wan Chao and did not dare to resist, how could they have the courage to leave this relatively safe VIP area and run downstairs to find food? Only God knows what the situation downstairs was, and whether those horrible monsters were still there. What was worse was that Wan Chao didn't reveal any intention of letting his subordinates follow him out. Oh, we are all beasts. Not only did we let you *ck our women, we also want to be your cattle and horse and feed you? The reason why these men tolerated Wan Chao's insults to their women was mainly because they thought that Wan Chao and the others were strong, brave and resourceful, and could lead them to survive in this post-apocalyptic world. Now, it seemed that Wan Chao just wanted to be a vampire that rode on their bodies. How could these people not feel angry? But when they found that their patience and compromise were unnecessary, their anger exploded. Brother Wan, we are a little scared. Why don't you lead us to find food? A man who looked like a student stood up and said. He was also one of the people that Wan Chao had just called out, and his girlfriend was lying naked on the ground, her face ashen. If I tell you to go, just go. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Wan Chao did not realize his crisis, and said fiercely, I want to protect the safety of this place, do you understand? I want to protect your girlfriend, or else they will be eaten by those monsters, do you understand? After that, Wan Chao kicked the student's girlfriend's nipple very viciously, making the students' blood boil. Whenever there was a big change in society, the first to jump out was often the students, because their blood had not completely cooled down. Therefore, when Yuan Chao insulted his girlfriend again, and when he remembered that he might die in the food hunt later, the student completely exploded. F*CKU, Yuan Chao you $% hashtag and, what else do you have other than insulting us? F*CKU at hashtag yen*. The student poured out all the anger he had accumulated over the past few days. Damn it, little bastard, I think you're tired of living. Yuan Chao picked up an iron rod that he had removed from a chair and was about to throw it at the student. He felt that it was necessary for him to establish his might once again. He wanted to use this little brat's life to demonstrate his might. Unfortunately, what he didn't know was that the students today were not as simple as the students in the 70s and 80s. Everyone, listen to me, this Yuan Chao asked us to go downstairs to find something, just to let us die in the hands of those monsters, so that he can occupy our women forever. As long as we go out, we will definitely die. This student usually liked to read online novels. At this time, this plot appeared a lot in the online novels. The protagonists in the online novels, when faced with this kind of situation, would mobilize the surrounding onlookers, and use the anger of all the crowd to deal with Yuan Chao. Sure enough, when the others heard the student's words, they all fell into deep thought. Some of them were even eager to try, but no one knew what they wanted to do. For the first time, Yuan Chao felt that the situation was somewhat out of control. If he was smart, he would have suspended the order to send people out. Unfortunately, Yuan Chao decided to kill this student, and use his blood to scare everyone first. Everyone, listen to me, we have more than 10 people. Yuan Chao only has 4 people, and he doesn't have a gun, so there is nothing to be afraid of. Let's go together, kill this beast, and avenge our women. After saying that, the student was the first to pounce on Yuan Chao, who was caught off guard, and Yuan Chao fell to the ground. There was such a psychological case. When a wall was clean without any graffiti, the wall could remain clean for a long time. But once someone drew graffiti on the wall would be covered with all kinds of graffiti in a short period of time. This case was also suitable to be used here. When the student was the first to pounce on Yuan Chao, the others who were filled with anger rushed to follow the student. They restrained Yuan Chao tightly, and all kinds of punches greeted Yuan Chao's body. When Yuan Chao's 3 subordinates saw this scene, they immediately picked up their iron rods, and wanted to support Yuan Chao. Therefore, a chaotic battle broke out in the VIP lounge, and the fight became fiercer and fiercer. According to the players' intelligence, if no one appeared to stop them, the 4 gangsters would be beaten to death, and 6 ordinary people would die. This movement would also attract the attention of the surrounding Yuan Ko, and all the humans would be killed. At this critical moment, everyone heard a loud bang. They all turned their heads and saw that the door, which was tightly blocked by all kinds of chairs and iron, had been blown open. Oh no! The monsters are here! Everyone screamed in fear. They thought that the monsters had come to kill them. Don't panic, everyone. I'm not a monster. I'm sent by the government to save everyone. Unexpectedly, a man's voice came from the door. Everyone looked and found that it was a young man in camouflage clothes. He looked valiant and dignified, and he exuded a strong aura. He held a long sword in his hand, and he didn't look like a monster. Wait, what did this person say? He's sent by the government? The government is here to save us? Hearing this, everyone's hearts immediately surged with infinite hope. That's great. The government is still here, and the government has sent people to save them. Those monsters must have been destroyed by the government. With this thought in mind, the entire VIP lounge was instantly filled with hope. On the broken street, Gohan walked in front, and there were 30 humans behind him. If one looked closely, they could see that the 30 humans were divided into 2 groups. One of the groups had the smallest number of people, only 4 people, and they were following behind Gohan like dogs, constantly flattering him. The other 26 people were staring at these 4 people with resentment, and they could not wait to crush their bones and scatter their ashes. These 30 people were the survivors that Gohan rescued from the VIP lounge. After combining a lot of information about this dungeon, Gohan realized that if he wanted to save as many survivors as possible, then his identity was very important. If he only said that he was a sword wielder, most of the survivors would not take him seriously. They might even think of killing him and robbing him of the sword in his hand. In the past, most players would show off their strength in front of these survivors, using the strength of their sword maidens to suppress the ambitions of these survivors. However, they had forgotten that the strength of an ancient sword wielder was only a few times that of a normal person. If they were to really fight with a normal person, they might not be able to gain the upper hand even if they were surrounded by normal people. More importantly, Yuan Ko was not afraid of bullets, and he would not be hit by them. However, the sword wielder was still a human, and they were still afraid of things like bullets. Although the protection of a close-fitting shield could block dozens of bullets, it was not enough. But what if someone used a machine gun to shoot at the sword wielder? During the early stages of the apocalypse, a large number of sword wielder died at the hands of humans. Of course, with Gohan's current strength, even 100 machine guns would not be able to do anything to Gohan. However, this would definitely cause the survivors to break up, and his goal of saving more than 621 survivors would fail. Therefore, Gohan thought of a better way to control these survivors. Therefore, Gohan came up with an idea that no one had ever thought of before, and that was to give himself the identity of a mysterious government agency on himself. Thanks to the strict control of social order by the Chinese government before the apocalypse, the government was still a powerful existence in the hearts of all the Chinese people. It had only been a few days since the apocalypse, and such thoughts were still deeply rooted in the hearts of these survivors. Especially when they heard that the government still existed, and that they had even rebuilt a refuge in a base deep in the mountains, these people were even more afraid of the government, and they were even more hopeful. Everyone hoped to enter a refuge protected by the government. Naturally, they obeyed Gohan, who claimed to be a member of the government's superpower organization, the Huaxia Dragon Group. They did not dare to have any thoughts of rebelling. This was especially true when Gohan used the sword chi of the heavenly sword to cut a collapsed boulder blocking the Wanda Cinema into pieces, and killed a dozen blood-colored demon wolves that were charging at him. After that, they became even more obedient to Gohan. If Gohan had asked to F***ck these naked women, these survivors probably would not have objected. The only thing that made these survivors unhappy was that when they proposed to kill Wan Chao and his 4 men who had committed heinous crimes, Gohan had clearly rejected them. I don't have the right to judge anyone. Only the law has the right to judge them. Before they are judged by the court, they are still citizens protected by the government. Gohan said righteously, words that even he himself did not believe. Although this made the other survivors very disappointed, they vaguely trusted Gohan even more. In the post-apocalyptic world where the law had collapsed, this person with such great power still used the law as his code of conduct. This person must be someone from the government. There was no mistake, and there was nothing safer than being under the protection of such a person. Chapter 574. By the time Gohan found the calendar, there were already 72 survivors behind him. These were the survivors that Gohan had saved along the way. Of course, the reason why Gohan was able to find so many people was because their locations had already been marked in various guides. However, in the eyes of the survivors that Gohan had saved, Gohan had become an omnipotent god. This self-proclaimed member of the Chinese Dragon Group seemed to have the ability to see through things and had the terrifying sword energy of a sword immortal. With a single slash, he could cut through any cement and save the people trapped inside. It was as if he already knew that there were survivors inside. With such a display of strength, Gohan's identity became unquestionable. None of the survivors dared to go against Gohan's wishes. They all hoped that Gohan would bring them to the government's refuge in the mountains. Of course, there were still some discordant factors, such as Wang Chao, who was trying his best to curry favor with Gohan. Gohan's actions along the way had made him believe that the government still existed. Although Gohan did not punish him, he did say that he would hand him over to the law. Wang Chao was a person who knew his own limit. He knew that with the crimes he had committed in the apocalypse, he would most likely be sentenced to death in the sanctuary. Therefore, he was secretly planning something with his subordinate. "Leader, it's not good, there's a battle ahead." Wang Chao, who had been serving Gohan like a dog, nervously pointed at the dusty battlefield in front of them. Although he had already seen Gohan's powerful combat abilities on the way here, he still couldn't help but feel fear when he saw those monsters that ignored all terrain and obstacles. Their attacks would all miss, and their attacks would always hit flesh. If not for a human like Gohan who could defeat them, Wang Chao really thought that the human race would have gone extinct from this world. "I see it." Gohan did not even look at Wang Chao. Although he did not kill Wang Chao, it did not mean that Gohan was interested in him. This man had to be used to his fullest potential. Now was not the best time to kill him, it was better to wait a little longer. "You guys take your time, I'll go first." After saying that, Gohan leaped into the air and jumped into the battle in front of him. On one side of the battle was a girl that Gohan was very familiar with. She was wielding a bronze sword, and was facing off against 3 demon cats. These demon cats were not very strong, and were only at the level of a ghost-level Yuan Ko. Logically speaking, this girl, who was 1 realm higher than them, should have been able to eliminate all these cat demons with ease. However, these demon cats were very agile. On the contrary, the sword-wielding girl's sword skills were extremely clumsy. She couldn't hit the demon cats at all. On the contrary, the demon cats kept leaving all kinds of scratches on her body, causing her personal shield to tremble constantly. Behind the girl, a handsome young man was nervously looking at the battlefield. Behind him, there were more than 40 survivors of different ages and expressions. Among them, many survivors were secretly looking at the surrounding environment. It seemed that once the girl lost the battle, these survivors would immediately escape from here. Suddenly, a demon cat that was entangled with the girl broke away from the girl's battle range and rushed towards the survivors. "The monster is coming, everyone run!" Several men shouted, and the survivors immediately scattered. Only the young man anxiously shouted, "Everyone, don't run, it's more dangerous to scatter, I will definitely protect everyone." Unfortunately, the young man's words were useless, and the survivors still scattered in all directions without any regard for their lives. If no one appeared at this time, then it was believed that these more than 40 survivors would have run away completely. At this critical moment, a golden light flashed in the sky, and a sword came from the west, tearing the entire sky apart. The demon cat that was in a state of pouncing was split into 2 by this golden sword energy, and was directly killed. The remaining sword energy rushed towards the other 2 demon cats that were besieging the girl. The demon cats were the most cunning Yuan Ko. After these 2 demon cats let out 2 cute meows, they immediately drilled into the depths of the ruins and disappeared in the blink of an eye. "We're saved." The young man and the girl looked on in shock, unable to believe that the 3 monsters that they fought so hard against were chased away by a single sword energy. Faintly, from the direction of the sword energy, under the illumination of the sun, a somewhat dazzling man was walking towards them step by step. This young man was naturally Kenzu, and this girl was naturally Yu Wang. System notification: Mission 1 completed. You have found Kenzu. System notification: Main mission updated. Mission 2. Search Hankow train station. There are a total of 120 survivors hidden in Hankow train station. Please find them and persuade them to join you and Kenzu's team. Big Brother. Hero. Thank you for your help. Fleeting Year Calendar jogged to Gu Han's side. His forehead was covered in sweat. It was obvious that he had suffered quite a fright just now. No problem. We're all in the same boat, we should help each other out. Seeing Fleeting Calendar's familiar face again, Gu Han couldn't help but recall the scene 2 months ago when he stabbed Fleeting Calendar to death in the same Yuzhong city. Gu Han couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. It was really difficult to face this sword ancestor who was full of saintliness. By the way, bro, which special ops team are you from? Why haven't I seen you before? Gu Han suddenly asked a question that stunned Fleeting Time as he cast aside his bad mood. Hero, what do you mean? Why don't I understand? Fleeting Calendar asked timidly. You really don't understand? Gu Han looked at Fleeting Calendar carefully, grabbed his wrist, and pinched it before pretending to understand. I know, so you're a wild sword bearer. You didn't join Huaxia Dragon Group. Huaxia Dragon Group. Fleeting Time Calendar was still a child, after all. He grew excited when he heard the name China Dragon Group. Hero, I've read a novel called China Dragon Group before. It turns out that everything in the novel is true. What novel? That story was made up by those otaku web novelists. The real Dragon Group is not like this. Gu Han rubbed Fleeting Calendar's head. At this moment, King Yu had just returned to Kenzu's side. King Yu looked at Gu Han in confusion. He was different from King Yu's current arrogant personality. The current King Yu was closer to a shy personality. She seemed to be afraid of Gu Han's sword aura. She stood timidly behind Kenzu and pulled on Kenzu's sleeve, looking like a shy wife. Are you a sword mistress too? King Yu mustered up his courage and said blankly, So there's a man among us. Should I call you Sword Man? Ahem, I'm the Sword Master. Forget it, I won't be able to explain this in a short time. Go gather the survivors first. If they get separated, they'll be in danger. Gu Han had just climbed up from King Yu's body, and now he saw another King Yu who looked exactly like him but didn't recognize him. Gu Han's emotions were complicated, so he took the initiative to gather the survivors first, to avoid any awkwardness with King Yu. In the beginning, Gu Han was just using King Yu. Gu Han wasn't interested in the relationship between King Yu and Kenzu. Even if King Yu and Kenzu had pledged their undying love, Gu Han wouldn't care. But for some reason, when he saw King Yu standing beside Kenzu and pulling on Kenzu's sleeve, Gu Han felt his heart twitch. Although he knew that these were just game data, Gu Han still felt uncomfortable. Only when they separated did Gu Han feel better. I don't like this feeling, Gu Han said. System notification. The total number of survivors you saved has reached 117, meeting the minimum requirement of 100, reaching F rank dungeon evaluation. You can shout, I want to leave, to automatically end the dungeon and return to the dungeon completion center. You can also continue to challenge higher achievements in the dungeon. Gu Han heard these system notifications. Of course, Gu Han wouldn't choose to leave the dungeon now. Actually, there was no need for Kenzu and the others to gather the survivors. Seeing the cat demons killed by a mysterious sword aura, the survivors that escaped all ran back. They even took the initiative to join Gu Han's team. Obviously, they felt that Gu Han, who was powerful and could release sword aura, was more reliable. He was much better than the little brat who didn't even have a hair on his mouth and the cold girl. Humph, they're all snobbish people. Brother Fleeting Calendar fought so hard to protect them. It's not worth it. The only person who did not join Gu Han's team was a survivor who was younger than Fleeting Calendar. He looked at the snobbish people with disdain and said angrily, You're wrong, Yu Hao. That hero is indeed stronger than us. He can protect these humans better. We have nothing to complain about. Fleeting Calendar patted Yu Hao's head. Let's go and meet that hero. He's the first of my kind that I've met. I have a lot of questions to ask him. What? If only I could be like them. Yu Hao pouted in dissatisfaction when he saw his idol running off to look for the hero, but he still followed after him. Chapter 575. It was important to kill the 3 demon cats as soon as possible. If they could not finish the battle within 5 minutes, many of the fleeing survivors would die at the hands of Yuan Ko. If even one of them died, Gohan might not be able to break the dungeon record. As Gohan was commanding the survivors to merge into one, he saw Kanzu walking towards him with 2 other people. Gohan knew that Kanzu had something to ask him. Of course, he had already prepared the answer in his heart. Everyone is tired. Let's rest here for a while. Gohan gestured for the survivors to rest as he walked towards Kanzu and the others. He pulled Kanzu to a corner and smiled. I knew you would come looking for me. Tell me, what do you want to ask me? What's going on with me? Fleeting Calendar's eyes were filled with doubt. Hero, are you the same as me? Why didn't you see your? Or are you also born from someone else's stomach? Fleeting Calendar felt so ashamed that his head was stuck to his stomach. Ha, don't call me hero. Just call me military governor. Gohan laughed. You're only half right. We are indeed the same kind of people. However, I did not jump out from someone else's stomach. Just like you, I'm a sword wielder. The sword in my hand is the same as your king of Yu's Gojian sword. We are both sword maidens. Sword wielder? Fleeting Calendar's ears twitched. Mr. Military Governor, are people like us called sword wielder? That's right. Gohan could not be bothered to continue the conversation in this question and answer format. Instead, he said systematically, people like us, who synchronize with the famous swords since ancient times and help the birth of the Sword Lady, and synchronize with the Sword Lady, are called sword bearers. Gohan roughly explained the situation of the sword bearer, and then made up a story about the situation of the world. The gist of it was that there had already been sword bearers before the Great Calamity, and the government had then gathered them together to form the Huaxia Dragon Group. He was the person in charge of the Huaxia Dragon Group in the entire Huaxia region. Currently, the government had set up a temporary base outside of WH City, and he was responsible for bringing the survivors to the temporary base. The reason why Gohan made up these excuses was to use the government's name to control the calendar. According to the normal storyline, Fleeting Year Calendar would be the leader of the team, and he would be in charge of the actions of the survivors. This was not good news for Gohan, who was determined to break the record. Once Fleeting Year Calendar's saintly nature flared up, not only would he not be able to save more people, but he would also cause the deaths of the survivors that he had already saved. This was something that Gohan would not allow to happen. Therefore, the reason why Gohan made up the identity of the Huaxia Dragon Group was not just to control the survivors, but also to control Fleeting Year Calendar. As expected, when Kanzu heard Gohan's words, he no longer doubted Gohan's identity. Instead, he began to admire Gohan. Well then, comrade Fleeting Year Calendar. Gohan suddenly stood up and looked at Fleeting Year Calendar with a serious expression. Fleeting Year Calendar was so shocked that he did not know what to do. He looked at Gohan nervously, not knowing what Gohan was going to do. Comrade Fleeting Year Calendar, I am now officially recruiting you on behalf of the Huaxia Dragon Group. I hope that you will join the Huaxia Dragon Group. In order to protect the people of China, you will fight against these damned monsters. Are you willing to give up your life? Fleeting Year Calendar became excited when he heard Gohan's words. In Fleeting Year Calendar's heart, it was his dream to join a mysterious organization, fight for humanity, and become a national hero. As expected, Fleeting Year Calendar replied without hesitation, I'm willing. Well, this scene looked a little like a marriage proposal. Very well. Comrade Fleeting Year, you are a hero. The people will not forget you. Gohan drew the heaven-reliant sword from his waist and spoke to Fleeting Year Calendar. Kneel. Fleeting Year Calendar knelt on the spot without hesitation. Gohan placed the heaven-reliant sword on Fleeting Year Calendar's shoulder and said in a solemn manner, I, the military governor of the Huaxia Dragon Group, the Major General of the Huaxia Dragon Group's East China region, hereby announce that Comrade Fleeting Year Calendar has joined the Great Huaxia Dragon Group. From today onwards, Fleeting Year Calendar will be our friend, comrade, and brother. We will fight for the future of China. Comrade Fleeting Year Calendar, are you willing to follow the orders of the organization and fight for the future of China? Guhan asked Fleeting Year Calendar. I'm willing. Fleeting Year Calendar replied without hesitation. Very well. Since Guhan had given himself the title of Major General of the Huaxia Dragon Group's East China region, it meant that Fleeting Year Calendar would have to listen to Guhan's orders. With that, the entire team was now in Guhan's hands. Even Kanzu would have to listen to Guhan's orders. Comrade Fleeting Year Calendar, take a break for 10 minutes. We still need to save more people, Guhan said before leaving Fleeting Year Calendar. Boss, there's something wrong with that guy, Yu Hao said as he moved closer to Fleeting Year Calendar after Guhan left. What's wrong, Lord Military Governor? Fleeting Year Calendar asked absent-mindedly. He was still immersed in the excitement of joining the Huaxia Dragon Group. I've seen soldiers before. My grandfather and father are both soldiers. He said that he's a major general, a soldier, but I can't sense any soldier's aura from him. He's not a soldier at all, Yu Hao said suspiciously. Little Hao, that's where you're wrong, Fleeting Year Calendar said in a serious tone. He's not a normal soldier. His superpower organization is not a proper military organization. It's normal for them to have fewer rules. It's just like how a singer can be a major general. You can't expect someone to have the aura of a soldier, right? Yu Hao could not refute Fleeting Year Calendar's words. He could only hope that the military governor was not a scammer. However, the military governor's strength was truly terrifying. There was no need for him to lie to Fleeting Year Calendar. At that moment, Guhan was in the midst of organizing a temporary management team for the survivors. Guhan was only one person. He could not effectively control the entire team. It would be bad if the survivors ran away when Guhan was fighting. That was why he needed to organize a management team for the survivors. With the help of this organization, he would be able to control the entire team. First, Guhan chose Wang Hao. This was because Wang Hao was a ruthless person. He was also afraid of being judged by Guhan. To Guhan, he was a very useful dog. Thus, Guhan made Wang Hao a thug in the organization. He asked Wang Chao to organize 10 people to maintain order in the team. He also gave Wang Chao 10 baseball bats as weapons. If any survivor tried to escape, Wang Hao would immediately catch them. Teach them a lesson. Wang Chao was very excited when he heard Guhan's task. From his point of view, since Guhan was willing to use him, he would definitely not look for trouble with him. Who knows, he might even be able to hug Guhan's thighs. After reaching the temporary base, he would be able to become a manager. What's more, the task that Guhan gave him was to manage other people. This was the job that Wang Hao was most familiar with. But what Wang Chao didn't expect was that Guhan had found another rival of his, Wang Hao's rival. It was the student who had rushed up to fight him in the movie theater. What Wang Chao couldn't accept was that this student named Li Yi became his immediate superior. He also managed 10 people under him. He was in charge of the entire team's administrative work. According to the military governor's orders, Li Yi was the captain, while Wang Chao was the vice-captain. For example, Li Yi was the prime minister, while Wang Chao was the general. One was in charge of civil affairs, while the other was in charge of military affairs. However, the prime minister's position was always higher than the general's. Boss, what is this military governor trying to do? He put Li Yi above our heads. Isn't he just making things difficult for us? One of Wang Chao's lackeys said in a bad mood. Humph, I thought this commander was a stubborn fool who only had a body full of superpowers. In the future, I can play with him however I want. I didn't expect him to be so vicious. He put Li Yi above my head. It's obvious that he's using Li Yi to monitor me and keep me in check. This Wang Chao still had some brains. He actually guessed Gohan's intentions. F***ck. Boss, why don't I find a chance to take that Li Yi? Another lackey made a gesture of rubbing his neck. Boss, there are monsters everywhere. As long as we do it discreetly, we can pretend that Li Yi was eaten by a monster. That military governor can't blame it on you. That's a good idea, but we can't do it now. Let's wait for Li Yi and the military governor to lower their guard. Wang Chao sneered. I understand. That military governor's abilities are all in that sword. If I can take that sword, then that superpower will be mine. Not to mention in Chao's restlessness, Gu Han led the team towards the Hankow train station after they had finished their preparations. Although there were 120 people hidden in the Hankow train station, along the way, there were many survivors hiding in the buildings on the side of the road. Gu Han, who was familiar with all the information, found these survivors one by one. Very quickly, the survivor team swelled from 117 to 143. Of course, quite a few Yuan silhouettes jumped out along the way. However, this was only a treasure sword tier basic instance dungeon for treasure sword tier sword wielders to train. No matter how strong the Yuan silhouettes inside were, they could not be that strong. Gu Han easily destroyed these Yuan silhouette. Fleeting time calendar and King Yu's eyes grew brighter and brighter. Finally, when Gohan and his team were resting halfway, King Yu quietly found Gohan and said to Gohan, Hey, sword man, can you teach me swordsmanship? Chapter 576. I'll teach you swordsmanship? Gohan was stunned. There was no such thing in the guide. There had never been a guide that said that Queen Yu would take the initiative to ask the sword wielder to learn swordsmanship. All the guides had at most interactions between players and the fleeting year calendar. There was almost no interaction with sword maidens like Queen Yu. Were there any hidden settings here? Gohan didn't know if it was the same as he guessed, but it shouldn't be a bad thing to teach Queen Yu swordsmanship. With this thought, Gohan started to guide Queen Yu. It wasn't that Queen Yu didn't know swordsmanship, but after she became the first sword maiden to awaken, she seemed to have forgotten her own swordsmanship. She had a strong foundation in swordsmanship, so under Gohan's guidance, Queen Yu's swordsmanship grew rapidly. In a short 10-minute break, Queen Yu, who was originally clumsy, improved rapidly under Gohan's guidance. Rather than Gohan's guidance, it was more accurate to say that she gradually recalled her own swordsmanship. Gohan's guidance seemed to coincide with Queen Yu's swordsmanship. Very quickly, Queen Yu's swordsmanship took shape. In the end, she didn't need Gohan's guidance, and used a complete set of swordsmanship that originally belonged to her. Seeing this, Gohan felt like a dozen bombs exploded in his heart. He felt that it was unbelievable. This was because when King Yu used her own sword technique, Gu Han was horrified to find that King Yu's sword technique was 70% similar to the 9 swords of mysterious heaven. Even though the other 30% was different, it was still an improvement on the foundation of the 9 swords of mysterious heaven. In other words, the swordsmanship in 9 swords of mysterious heaven was Queen Yu's original swordsmanship. However, later on, someone improved her swordsmanship and combined 9 different moves and mental cultivation methods to form 9 swords of mysterious heaven that Gohan knew. Queen Yu was actually the ancestor of Gohan's swordsmanship. How could this be? After understanding these things, Gohan fell silent. It was not that he had never taught him the king's surpassing sword technique. Although King Yu learned the sword technique very quickly, she never recalled the sword technique that originally belonged to her. Gohan only thought that there was a deviation in the sword technique memory of this fragment of consciousness, so he didn't think too much about it. He didn't expect there to be such a secret hidden inside. Could it be that when King Yu first split his sword maiden consciousness and entered the game, he was able to erase this portion of his sword art memory? Gohan continued to speculate, and before he knew it, the 10-minute break had already passed. Fleeting Calendar walked up to Guhan and asked, "Military Governor, are we still going to rest?" "Oh no, let's go." Only then did Guhan wake up from his contemplation. He waved his hand and once again called for the team to move out and began to rescue the survivors in Hankow train station. There was nothing much to say about the operation. Guhan left Fleeting Calendar in charge of the safety of the survivors, while he charged into the train station to rescue the survivors. Originally, this quest required Guhan and Fleeting Year Calendar to enter the Hankow train station to rescue the survivors. The system had also set up many difficulties for the quest, as well as many traps that could lead to the deaths of the survivors. The survivors waiting outside of Hankow train station would also be ambushed by a wave of Yuanli attacks. Without the help of Fleeting Year Calendar, most players would not be able to rescue the survivors from Hankow train station. However, these difficulties were nothing but a joke in the face of Guhan's unparalleled strength. Soon enough, the 120 survivors were rescued by Guhan. It took him less than 20 minutes to complete the mission, which was 4 times faster than the 1.5 hour that the strategy suggested. The survivors waiting outside of the train station were protected by Fleeting Calendar, so there were no casualties. Under the management of Li Yi and Wang Chao, these 120 people were successfully integrated into Guhan's group, and the entire group swelled by a whole circle. System notification: Quest 2 completed. The survivors at Hankow train station have joined the party. System notification: Main quest has been updated. Quest 3. Search the Eastern Modern Garden District. There are a total of 81 survivors hidden in the district. Please rescue them and convince them to join you and Kanzu's party. System notification: You have rescued a total of 263 survivors. The minimum requirement of 100 survivors has been met, and the dungeon has been evaluated as an A-rank dungeon. You can shout, "I'm leaving," to end the dungeon and return to the dungeon's completion center. You can also continue to challenge for higher achievements in the dungeon. Eastern Modern Garden District? Guhan glanced at the name. It was a normal camp, and there weren't any powerful Yuan messing around. However, there was still a bit of trouble. The 81 survivors were hidden in 22 different locations, and some of the locations were completely blocked off. The sword wielder was not an excavator, and even if the excavator was here, it wouldn't be easy to move these damned collapsed boulders. If a normal player wanted to rescue all 81 survivors, it would take at least 5 hours. Just saving these people would take up more than half of the time. Therefore, most of the strategies recommended that ordinary players only save a portion of the survivors that were the easiest to save. About 20 survivors were saved, and the rest of the survivors were left to fend for themselves. In any case, the SSS rating was only 500 people, so it didn't matter if they lost 50 or so survivors. Unfortunately, Guhan couldn't be lazy. These 50 survivors were enough to completely block him from entering the dungeon record. However, Guhan didn't want to waste 5 hours on this, so Guhan decided to find himself a helper. Yu Hao, come here. Guhan suddenly called out Yu Hao's name. Yu Hao was stunned. He didn't know why Guhan was looking for him. Could it be that the military governor is trying to kill me because I'm always by Fleeting Year Calendar's side? Yu Hao, who had read many political novels, walked up to Guhan with trepidation. He looked at Guhan warily, wondering if Guhan was going to give him a mission that would definitely kill him. Do you want to become a sword wielder? Unexpectedly, Guhan actually asked a question that Yu Hao had never even thought of. A sword wielder? A person with superpowers like you and Fleeting Year Calendar? Yu Hao's eyes glowed brightly, but soon dimmed. I'm not as capable as you and brother Fleeting Calendar. That's not necessarily true. Becoming a sword wielder doesn't depend on your ability, but your talent. Guhan smiled. Even a pig can become a sword wielder as long as it has talent. I can feel it. Your sword Maiden is nearby. Follow me. After saying that, Guhan strode towards the commercial street not far away. Yu Hao didn't hesitate and directly followed behind Guhan. He followed behind Guhan, passing through a store with its open doors and things scattered everywhere. Finally, he stopped in front of a store. "Throw your Rem's anime merchandise shop?" Yu Hao raised his head and saw a strange name. "What are we doing here? Isn't this a place that sells toys?" Yu Hao asked in confusion. "Don't ask. Follow me." Guhan led the way into the shop. Yu Hao had no choice but to follow behind Guhan. This was a small anime merchandise store. The shelves were mainly filled with figurines. Most of them were Liem's figurines. Aside from these figurines, there were also various Liem costumes of various sizes on the other wall. At the most eye-catching spot on the wall was a very seductive Leimu cosplay photo. It was obvious that the shop owner had an unusual interest in Leimu. However, Rem was not Gohan's goal. Gohan's real target was a huge sword that shone with a metallic luster. The hilt was blue and red, but the blade was golden. "This is your sword, Maiden." Guhan picked up the huge sword. It looked heavy on the surface, but when he held it in his hand, it only weighed less than 5 kilograms. Even a child could easily swing this sword. "This is my sword, Maiden?" Yu Hao looked at the huge golden sword in confusion. "Don't lie to me. I know how to cosplay as well. This is just a plastic sword. How can it be the same as Brother Fleeting Calendar's bronze sword?" "Who said Fleeting Calendar can't be a sword, Maiden?" Guhan placed the giant sword in front of Yu Hao. The sword was still considered a giant sword in the hands of Guhan, who was about 1.8 meters tall. In front of Yu Hao, who was only about 1.3 meters tall, it was even bigger. It looked more than twice as tall as Yu Hao. "All right, I want it." Yu Hao's heart started palpitating as he looked at the sword. Why aren't the military governor and the rest back yet? Fleeting Calendar and King Yu looked around nervously in case a monster suddenly jumped out and attacked them. "He's here. Captain Military Governor is out." King Yu's eyes were better than Fleeting Calendar's. He immediately saw Guhan walking out from the corner of the street. There were 2 people following behind the military governor. Yu Hao is back as well. Strange, who's the little girl behind Yu Hao? Fleeting Calendar asked curiously. There was a girl who was shorter than Yu Hao behind him. "Introduce her." Guhan walked up to Fleeting Calendar and pointed at the little girl. "She's Rui, Yu Hao's sword maiden. From now on, Yu Hao is a member of China's Dragon Group." Chapter 577. Rui? Rui's sword? Fleeting Year Calendar had more or less grasped the general knowledge of the sword maiden, so he immediately asked after hearing Rui's name. "No, it's missing a word." Guhan laughed. "To be more precise, she is the Rui Celestial Sword. Rui Celestial Sword, cleave in 2. Yu Hao watched helplessly as Rui, who was a head smaller than him, swung the gigantic Rui Celestial Sword around to cleave the cement rubble into 2. She then jumped into the rubble and rescued the survivors who were hiding inside. This was the 60th survivor that Yu Hao had rescued. Soon, all 81 survivors in the Eastern Modern Garden would be rescued. Did this military governor treat me as a laborer? That's why he helped me become a swordsman. Yu Hao was in a bad mood as he watched Lin Huang leisurely standing there, directing the Rui scepter to move towards the next ruin where there were human survivors. Yu Hao once again used clean cut. There was nothing to be suspicious about. Guhan was obviously treating Yu Hao as a laborer. After all, Yu Hao's sword maiden was the Rui Celestial Sword. Although Guhan's sword aura could also cleave the collapsed cement slabs, Guhan's sword aura was not free. Each use required 100 quarks of sword essence. In the real world, Guhan's sword essence was almost at the level of 15,000 quarks. However, in the game, Guhan's sword essence was only around 8,000 quarks. If he used sword aura, he could only use it 80 times. Compared to the ruins of the residential area, 80 sword auras was like trying to put out a burning cart of firewood with a cup of water. Moreover, if he used sword auras, he might hurt the humans in the ruins. Therefore, the Rui celestial sword, which was more adept at dealing with boulders, became a better cutting machine than Gohan. Cleave in two was only a basic skill of the Rui celestial sword. It only required 10 quarks of sword essence, which was 10 times less than Gohan's sword aura. Moreover, using cleave in two to cut boulders was gentler, like cutting tofu. It would not hurt the humans buried underground. Of course, the most important thing was, there was no need to trouble Gohan with this laborious task. It would be much more comfortable to just leave it to an NPC. With Yu Hao's efforts, the rescue work progressed very smoothly. The work that should have taken 5 hours only took less than half an hour, and it was almost over. Some readers wanted to ask, since there was such a useful tool NPC, were the players in the past all fools? Why not use this method? That was because this method was also Gohan's own creation. It was a byproduct of Gohan's research on the Yuwang Gojin Jian Jian instance dungeon. In the past 200 years, only Gohan had found this method and found the key NPC, Yu Hao. Yu Hao did not have any notable achievements in history. There were only a few words about him in the history books. Yu Hao from Wuhan. He was a swordsman of the famous sword level. He was one of Kunzu's assistants in his early years. He later died in the Battle of Yanjing City. That was all that the history books had to say about Yu Hao. Not many people paid attention to him. However, when Gohan was researching the Yu King Gojin instance dungeon, he noticed this person. It was not that Gohan felt that there was something special about Yu Hao. In order to find clues to break through the Yu King Gojin instance dungeon, Gohan had researched Kunzu's subordinates, especially those from Wuhan. Therefore, Gohan collected a lot of information about Yu Hao. He even specially read through Yu Hao's epitaph. Only then did he discover more clues about Yu Hao. It turned out that Yu Hao's swordswoman was the Wishful Sword. Moreover, this Wishful Sword was also found in Wuhan City. Therefore, Gohan went to look up the history books about the Wishful Sword. Only then did he know that the first owner of the Wishful Sword was indeed Yu Hao. He found it in a shop called Throw Yu Rem. However, Yu Hao did not become the sword wielder when he first met Kunzu. Instead, he followed Kunzu to set up a camp outside the city. 10 days later, when he sneaked back to Yuzhong City to collect food, he found the Wishful Sword and became the sword wielder. Thinking that the Wishful Sword would not be of much help to him in the Yu King Gojin instance dungeon, Gohan did not pay much attention to this sword wielder called Yu Hao. He only remembered this information in his heart. This was a secret that Gohan had discovered by chance. The other players who were in the Wuhan Search Instance dungeon naturally would not have thought that the little fellow beside Kunzu was actually a sword wielder. Therefore, no one had found this simple trick until Gohan entered this instance dungeon and heard Yu Hao's name. That was when he found the Wishful Sword in the depths of his memory. "Are there any survivors, Captain Military Governor?" Yu Hao asked Gohan as he looked at the Oriental Modern Garden, which had been almost completely replaced by his Wishful Sword. "Yes, we're still missing 10 people," Gohan replied. "That's impossible. We've searched through all the Rui here. There's no other place to hide people," Yu Hao said, puzzled. "Come with me." Gohan jumped down from where he was standing and led Yu Hao to a flower bed in the residential area. He pointed at the flower bed and said, "There are still 10 people here." "That's impossible. This is just a flower bed." Yu Hao still did not believe it. Gohan pursed his lips. He casually swung the heavenly sword in his hand and used a sword energy to split the entire flower bed open, revealing the underground space under the flower bed. "Is this an underground parking lot?" Yu Hao poked his head into the flower bed and found that it did not have the usual smell of rubber in underground parking lots. Instead, it was filled with the smell of metal. "This is an interesting place." Gohan took the lead and jumped into the hole. Yu Hao followed closely behind and jumped in as well. The space under the flower bed was indeed not a parking lot. Instead, it looked like an underground research institute with a sci-fi feel. All the walls were made of steel, and there were all kinds of equipment that Yu-Hao could not name in various places. Da-da-da-da-da. Unexpectedly, Yu-Hao heard a loud roar. Being familiar with all kinds of FPS games, he immediately reacted and shouted, "Oh no! It's a submachine gun!" He immediately dropped to the ground. 9 swords of black heaven, sword of the spring. Guhan extended the heavenly sword in his hand and an umbrella-shaped sword energy shot out from the tip of the sword, blocking all the bullet. At the same time, he shouted, "Stop shooting! I'm a human, not those monsters." Hearing Guhan's words, the gunshots stopped. After a while, a rough man's voice came from the other side. "Brother over there, are you really a human? Have you ever seen a talking monster?" Guhan asked in a loud voice. "Then wait for me. I'm coming." Seeing that the battle was over, Yu-Hao, who was panicking, crawled up from the ground. At that moment, the big man who had spoken walked over. The big man was wearing a well-ironed military uniform. Looking at his shoulder, there were 2 bars and 4 stars. He seemed to be an officer. However, his military uniform was covered in all kinds of dirt, and his face was covered in dirt. When he saw the sunlight shining through the hole, he couldn't help but squint his eyes. It seemed that he had stayed in this dark underground space for a long time, which was why he was so uncomfortable with the sunlight. "Dad." When he saw the man's face clearly, Yu-Hao suddenly cried out in surprise and threw himself into the man's arms. "My good son, why is it you?" When Yu-Hao's father saw Yu-Hao, he was dumbfounded. In his mind, his precious son had probably died a long time ago. However, he never imagined that the son that he had yearned for day and night would actually jump out and appear in front of him. "I really deserve to die." The man suddenly threw his gun to the ground and stomped on it. "I almost killed my own son." Then, he hugged Yu-Hao tightly and kissed him, causing Yu-Hao's face to turn red. "Suawei, what's the situation? Is it a human?" In the darkness, another older voice came out. "Dad. It's Little Hao. Your grandson Little Hao is here." Suawei, Yu-Hao's father, said excitedly. Listening to Suawei's words, the old man who spoke was his father, Yu-Hao's grandfather. "Oh, Yu-Hao's whole family was here." "What? My precious grandson is here." The sound of footsteps could be heard as an old man who looked similar to Yu-Hao ran out. He was also wearing a military uniform, and the insignia on his shoulder was a golden olive with 2 golden stars. Following behind the old man were 8 valiant soldiers in training uniforms. Each of them had a golden light in their eyes, strong arms, and an awe-inspiring aura. At first glance, one could tell that they were the king of soldiers in the army. Yu Mutian, Major General and Commander-in-Chief of China's Hubei Military District. Yu Suawei, Senior Colonel of China's Hubei Military District. These 2 people were Yu-Hao's father and grandfather, and they were also the biggest obstacles to Guhan's mission. Because the military identity of the Yu family's grandfather and grandson was undoubtedly more reliable than Guhan's government identity when the government was almost completely out of control. To put it bluntly, as long as these 3 people entered the survivor group, it was possible that Guhan's prestige in the group would be taken away in an instant. Even the fleeting calendar might be on his side. If it was possible, Guhan didn't want to save these 10 people. He wanted to let them fend for themselves underground. It didn't matter if they died. However, Guhan had to save these 10 people. This was because this was the largest group of survivors in the dungeon. There were close to 200 survivors hiding in the Hubei military district. Without the Yu family's grandfather and grandson, it would be impossible for them to join the survivors. Chapter 578. After getting intimate with his precious grandson, Yu Suawei turned his attention to Guhan. At the same time, 8 submachine guns were pointed at Guhan. If Guhan dared to make a move, These submachine guns would turn Gohan into a sieve. At least, that was what Yu Suawei and Yu Hao thought. Dad! Grandpa! What are you doing? Put down your guns! Yu Hao shouted when he saw this scene. He wasn't afraid of Gohan being killed. He was afraid that his grandfather and father would be killed by Gohan. He had seen Gohan's superpower before. Invulnerability was probably what Gohan looked like. Little Hao, you don't know how sinister people are in this world. This refuge is our military's top secret. Since he brought you here, he's definitely not an ordinary person. You have to be careful, Yu Suawei said with a righteous look on his face. No, it's really not like that. Dad, we are here to save someone. We just accidentally broke the flower bed. Yu Hao suddenly stopped talking. He remembered that it was Gohan who broke the flower bed. It was obvious that Gohan knew that there was someone under the flower bed. However, when he thought about it, it wasn't strange that Gohan knew about the flower bed. After all, Gohan was the leader of the China Dragon Group. He was a major general. It was normal for him to know the location of the refuge. Dad, Grandpa, don't be mistaken. The military governor is a soldier like us. He is a major general of the China Dragon Group. He is one of us. Yu Hao quickly explained. China Dragon Group? Major General of the China Dragon Group? Yu Suawei and Yu Mutian looked at each other in dismay. They had never heard of the China Dragon Group. Major General? Captain? Yu Suawei snorted in disdain and looked at Gohan with disdain. Young man, it's smart to lie. How can a sloppy person like you be a major general? Besides, I've never heard of a major general captain in the army. Who are you, what do you do, and what are you trying to do? You better tell me now. Leniency for those who confess, severity for those who resist. Do you understand? Yu Suawei, Yu Mutian, just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Gohan waved his hand. One of the soldiers felt his submachine gun disappear. It was in Gohan's hand, and the muzzle was pointed at Yu Mutian's head. Kid, what are you doing? How dare you attack a high-ranking official of China? Are you tired of living? Yu Suawei saw that his father was being pointed at, and he immediately panicked. Don't be nervous. I just feel that this gun is a little interesting. Gohan chuckled and returned the gun to the soldier. I just want to tell you that the situation has changed. Yuan Ko has invaded the world, and the State Council has ordered the Dragon Group to take over the country's security. Our Dragon Group is in charge now, so you should cooperate with us to maintain the stability of the country. Don't let the country fall into chaos. What the hell is this guy talking about? Isn't the Dragon Group trying to usurp the throne? Yu Suawei was about to order his men to arrest Gohan when Yu Mutian suddenly waved his hand. Comrade, I remember now. Our country does have a Dragon Group. It was established by the founding father of the country. However, it's been a long time, and I've forgotten about it. Yu Mutian smiled as he shook Gohan's hand. Comrade from the Dragon Team, can you tell us about the situation outside? What's wrong with this world? Who is this Yuan Ko that you're talking about? Why are they like phantoms? Even bullets can't penetrate them. Comrade, don't you know that hundreds of our brothers, soldiers, and comrades have died in the hands of these Yuan Ko? It's because of their protection that we're able to keep our lives. Yu Mutian's eyes started to tear up as he spoke. No one knew if he was really tearing up or if he was just putting on an act. However, sly old foxes like him weren't simple at all. However, this old man was probably faking it. The Dragon Group was just a random unit that Gohan had made up. This old man actually said that he had heard of it and even said that it was established during the founding father of the country. Even Gohan was impressed by his ability to adapt to the situation. However, since this old man was willing to play along, things would be much easier. At the very least, he had to stabilize these 10 people and prevent them from causing any trouble. Senior Yu, the 2D Yuan Ko is currently attacking us humans. Their bodies are in between dimensions, so our normal attacks are unable to harm them. Only the sword-bearers of the dragon group can fight against them. Guhan lied. The ancestors of the dragon group predicted this a long time ago, so we secretly formed the China Dragon Group with the founding father. We recruited people with the talent to become sword-bearers into our dragon group. During peaceful times, the dragon group never revealed itself. However, now that the Yuan Ko has invaded, it's time for us to come out and protect the country and its people. Comrade, I'm honored to inform you that your grandson, Yu Hao, has discovered the talent to become a sword-bearer. He has officially become a great sword-bearer and has joined the dragon group. What? Little Hao, you've joined a swindler organization? Are you crazy? Yu Suowei still didn't believe Gu Han's words and questioned his son. How about this, Comrade Yu Hao? Let Rui come in and show off your strength. Let your father and grandfather believe in the existence of the dragon group. Gu Han patted Yu Hao's shoulder. Yu Hao nodded excitedly. After all, he was still a child. Being able to show off his superpower in front of his grandfather and father was an exciting thing no matter how one looked at it. So with a wave of his hand, a sword light flew into Yu Hao's hand. Then the Yu family's father and son saw their grandson, holding a sword inexplicably. They swore to the heavens that this sword had appeared out of nowhere and they hadn't seen it before. What happened next was even more magical. The sword suddenly released a blinding light, and then turned into a short girl. She was still holding the huge sword in her hand. Is this magic? Yu Suowei muttered to himself in disbelief. Whether it is magic or not, you'll know soon enough. Guhan smiled and said to Yu Hao, let Rui cut down a part of the ceiling and use it as a ladder. Let your grandfather and father leave this place. It's no longer safe here. The second wave of Yuan Ko's attack will come at any time. Yes. Under Yu Hao's command, Rui easily cut down a part of the ceiling and made a slope. When all 10 of them returned to the ground through the slope, they finally believed that there was a monster like Yuan Ko in this world. There was also a sword wielder who could fight against Yuan Ko. The heavens have pity on us. The heavens have not destroyed the human race. Yu Mutian sighed. At the beginning of the apocalypse, when he saw that the bullets couldn't hurt them at all, and that even the walls couldn't stop them from moving, Yu Mutian felt despair. He felt that the human race was about to go extinct. He didn't expect that the ancestors of the human race had already predicted this disaster. They had even organized the dragon group to fight against the Yuan Ko. Senior Yu, my goal is to bring all the human survivors to our dragon group's temporary camp in Mulan Mountain. That is a temporary camp that our dragon group has set up. It can effectively protect the humans from the threat of Yuan Yen. I wonder if Senior Yu would like to come with us? Or do you have something else to do? Guhan asked after the members of the Yu family got used to the sunlight outside. Of course. Together. Yu Mutian replied immediately. If he didn't follow Guhan, where else could he go? Was he looking to die? There are some things that I have to say in advance. If you join the dragon group, you will have to listen to all of my commands. Will this make things difficult for you? Guhan asked. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to? Yu Suowei was stopped by Yu Mutian. No problem, I'm an old man now. I'm happy to be able to keep my life. There's nothing difficult about it. Military Governor, don't worry, we will listen to your commands. Yu Mutian said with a smile. That's good. Military Governor, I thank you for your understanding. Guhan smiled happily. Oh yes, I forgot to tell you that guns are useless against Yuan Ko. It would be bad if they accidentally fire in the middle of the crowd. Why don't you let me take care of them? It'll be safer that way. Guhan had to put away all the submachine guns. If he didn't take care of them well, the soldiers might start firing in the middle of the crowd. If that happened, it would be a huge loss to Guhan. You want our guns? That's impossible, that's impossible. Yu Suowei's father stopped him before he could finish his sentence. Suawe, and all of you, hand over your guns to the military governor. Let him take care of them for us. Yumutian ordered loudly. The soldiers looked at each other, then at Suwe. They were all hesitant, not knowing what to do. To a soldier, a gun was their second life. How could they hand over their guns so easily? As a result, they didn't take action. This was Yumutian's plan. Even an old man like him was willing to give in, but his subordinates weren't willing to hand over their guns. That way, Yumutian wouldn't be able to force them. It was a pity that Yumutian was wrong. Guhan sneered, and the heavenly sword in his hand slashed downwards. In the next second, the weapons in the hands of the soldiers were all turned into scrap metal. An ancient sword hero was nothing more than this. Chapter 579. After the father and son of the Yu clan joined the group of survivors, they quickly attracted everyone's attention. They couldn't do anything about it, as they brought along 8 soldiers full of murderous aura, which was too conspicuous. Just now, because Gohan had smashed their guns into pieces, these people's mood was already terrible to the extreme. The murderous aura on their bodies was about to spread out, and the survivors couldn't help but tremble when they saw these soldiers. Commander Yu. Very quickly, a few businessmen among the survivors recognized Yumutian's identity. Soon, the news that the commander of the Hubei military region had joined the group of survivors spread. At that time, some people took the initiative to surround the father and son of the Yu family. These people's thoughts were very simple. Since the temporary camp was run by the government, Commander Yu's status must be higher than this military governor's. When they reached the camp, they naturally had to listen to Commander Yu's orders. It would not be wrong to suck up to him now. Gohan saw all of this. At this stage, the addition of the Yu family could be considered a good thing. Since Commander Yu had silently joined the team and accepted Gohan's leadership, the Yu family should be able to protect the Yu family. Obviously, Gohan's identity as a government official had been confirmed once again, and there was no doubt about it. Following that, under Gohan's command, the team swept through 2 large-scale survivor gathering points, and also rescued a lot of scattered survivors on both sides of the road. The number of survivors in the team quickly swelled to 430. At this time, Gohan only needed to shout, "I want to leave," and he would immediately leave this dungeon with an SSS rating. Of course, this was far from enough. Gohan's goal was to break the 621 record and make a big news. Next, Gohan began to lead the survivors to the Hu Military District North Headquarters. Of course, on the way there, Gohan still needed to make a turn and go to another place to rescue the other 21 people. As mentioned before, the total number of survivors that could be saved in the entire map was 650. So far, Gohan had already saved most of the survivors. There were only 2 places that still had survivors. One was in the headquarters of the Hubei military region, and the other was in Yuan Ko's vegetable basket. This Yuan Ko was a nether-level Yuan Ko, which was equivalent to a beginner spiritual sword-level sword wielder. He was the strongest Yuan Ko that appeared in Wuhan City during the first wave of attacks. Of course, the strongest Yuan Ko in Wuhan City at that time should have been Misaka Mikoto. However, she did not appear in the published human history. Therefore, this nether-level Yuan Ko naturally became the strongest Yuan Ko in Wuhan City. In reality, Gohan had killed a nether-rank Yuan Ko heroic spirit archer saint with his own strength. However, that was because the sword essence in Gohan's body had already reached 14,000 points, and he also had Doyu and Heavenly Sword in his hands. Coupled with the Yin-Yang sword art, he was able to unleash the strength to kill the nether-level Yuan Ko. Previously, when he logged out of the game, Gohan's strength in the game was still a few times higher than his strength in reality. However, now that he had returned to the game, Gohan's strength in reality had far exceeded his strength in the game. His sword essence alone had reached 15,000 points, and he had 2 brand new sword maidens, the Doyu sword and the Juzi sword. He even had the sword mark of the fairy sword Maiden, the sword of victory, in his body. Based on pure statistics, the real Gohan was more than 10 times stronger than the real Gohan in the game. Well, the above said so much nonsense, but in reality, the real Gohan was definitely no match for a nether-level Yuan-ko. If Gohan were to provoke this nether-level Yuan-ko, he would undoubtedly be courting death. In that case, the players would have to ask, why would the system arrange for a nether-level Yuan-ko in the treasure sword-level sword-wielder instance dungeon? Wasn't it clear that the players were not allowed to save these humans? In fact, the existence of this nether-level Yuan-ko seemed to be designed to prevent the players from completing the instance dungeon perfectly. This was because only treasure sword-level sword-wielder could enter the instance dungeon, and a nether-level Yuan-ko was not in existence that a treasure sword-wielder could deal with. However, there was no other way, because there was indeed a nether-level Yuan-ko in history. Moreover, it was this Yuan-ko that caused the destruction of the survivor camps that the Kanzu worked hard to build around Wuhan City. The system was only trying to restore history. Of course, the system also knew that a nether-level Yuan-ko was a treasure sword-wielder, so the system set this nether-level Yuan-ko as a Yuan-ko who would not take the initiative to attack. In other words, as long as you did not provoke him, he would not attack you. For a treasure sword-wielder, this was enough. Who would be so bored as to provoke a nether-level Yuan-ko? However, at this time, Gohan took the initiative to provoke this Yuan-ko. There was no other reason than that Gohan felt that he could defeat this nether-level Yuan-ko. Moreover, he could defeat this Yuan-ko very easily. It was worth mentioning that this nether-level Yuan-ko was not just a decoration. When he first appeared, it was also a huge challenge that the system arranged for the players. Only by conquering this challenge could they achieve an achievement that was sufficient to break the record. Wan Chao, come here for a moment. Gohan waved his hand and called his lackey Wan Chao to his side. Leader! Leader! Wan Chao nodded and walked over. This was the first time that Gohan took the initiative to call him to his side. Wan Chao was nervous as he did not know why Gohan was looking for him. Go and recruit another 40 people to join your team. Gohan patted Wan Chao's shoulder, as if saying, I have an important task for you, I have high hopes for you. Remember, just recruit people who are brave enough. Gohan whispered in Wan Chao's ear. Wan Chao listened to these words and nodded continuously. However, he quickly revealed a troubled expression and said to Gohan, Leader, it's easy for me to recruit people and lead them to maintain order in the team. But leader, I'm just a hooligan. How can I control 50 brave people? Each of them is a thorn in my side, and I can't subdue them in a short period of time. Wan Chao's words were not false. If 50 felons were placed in front of you, and you were asked to control them in just a few minutes, turning them into your subordinates, unless you were as strong as Gohan, you would only be courting death. These felons would devour all of your bones. Idiot! Gohan glared at Wan Chao, and then whispered in Wan Chao's ear again. When Wan Chao heard these words, he looked at Gohan with a frightened and submissive gaze. This guy, why does he look more like a gangster than me? The advancing survivors suddenly felt a tremor. They panicked and looked to the south where the tremor came from. They saw a huge monster with 3 feet rising from the ground and finally growing to a height of 20 stories. 3 soft metal tentacles supported a huge head. The middle of the head was emitting a scarlet light. It looked like a huge octopus. What was more terrifying was the octopus monster's eyes. From its eyes it could emit a dark red ray like 2 sharp whips. Everywhere that was swept by these long whips would burn with raging flames. Even the strongest metal would turn into a pool of golden molten iron under the radiation of the ray. What kind of monster is this? All the survivors couldn't help but wail when they saw this octopus monster. They seemed to see themselves being ravaged into a pool of charcoal under the hands of this octopus monster. This is Death Ray. This is Death Ray. A man wearing a white coat and glasses, who looked like a scientific researcher, shouted in panic, "Run! Quickly run! If you get hit by the death ray, you're dead! Quickly run! Quickly run!" With this shout, the entire survivor team quickly began to move. At least half of the survivors began to try to escape from the direction of this terrifying killing machine. Looking at the crowd that was about to collapse, Gohan didn't panic. This scene was already within Gohan's expectations. According to the previous dungeons, when this nether-level Yuan Ko appeared, it would inevitably cause a huge panic among the survivors. This was the moment that tested the swordsman's ability to control the situation. If the swordsman didn't have the ability, then more than half of the survivors would escape to unknown places, and it would be impossible to find them again. And if the sword-bearer had the ability, then they would be able to calm the restlessness from the beginning. Those sword-bearers who managed to kill more than 600 people were the ones who managed to control the situation. At most, there were less than 10 survivors who managed to escape. However, with a team of more than 600 people, with just the strength of the sword-bearers, it was difficult to suppress the entire scene. This was because the sword-bearers could only take care of a small area. There were only 100 survivors. As for the survivors in other areas, even if Gohan wanted to, he would not be able to control them. In fact, there was no need for a sword-bearer like Gohan to personally control these survivors. Using the power of a sword-bearer to control them was like using a butcher's knife to kill chickens. At this time, a sufficiently fierce human could scare more than 10 survivors in the chaos. Wan Chao had become the key of the key. At this time, when Wan Chao saw this terrifying robot, his heart was filled with fear. Even though Gohan had explained a lot of things to him, his legs still couldn't stop trembling. He wanted to escape this terrifying place. At this time, Gohan's voice suddenly exploded in Wan Chao's ears. "Wan Chao, it's time for you to perform." Gohan's voice was like a muffled thunder, blasting Wan Chao out of his panic. Thinking of what Gohan had just told him, Wan Chao gritted his teeth and led the 50 newly recruited subordinates out. Chapter 580. Everyone, don't run. With Major General Military Governor here, we are safe. Even if the sky falls, Major General Military Governor will support us. You are not allowed to run, all of you stay here. Whoever runs, don't blame me for being ruthless. Wan Chao took out a megaphone and shouted. He didn't take this megaphone from the store, but from a corpse. It was the body of an old man, probably a square dancer. He was dressed in red and green, and had a megaphone tied to his waist. It seemed that this old woman's voice was quite soft, otherwise, why would she need a megaphone? But Wan Chao knew that the bigger the megaphone on her waist, the louder her voice would be. Even if Wan Chao met such an old lady, he wouldn't be able to do anything. She could point at your head and scold you for an hour without even repeating her words. Wan Chao couldn't afford to offend such a person. Some people would ask, isn't Wan Chao a gangster? Why don't you let someone teach these old women a lesson? Wan Chao also wanted to teach them a lesson, but he didn't dare. There was once an old gangster who taught an old woman a lesson. As a result, the old woman gathered hundreds of old sisters and old men to block the government's door, forcing the government to take action and lock the old gangster in. He hasn't come out yet, and no one knew whether he was killed by those monsters or not. Therefore, with these seniors as an example, Wan Chao didn't dare to touch these old women. Alright, back to the main topic. Although Wan Chao's voice was loud, it was useless. The crowd was still surging, and there was a possibility that they would collapse due to fear. Seeing this, Wan Chao could only say to his subordinates, all of you, watch carefully. If anyone dares to leave this place, beat them to death. As long as they don't die, the Admiral will take care of everything for you. Hearing this, all the survivors shuddered, then they looked at Wan Chao's subordinates with some fear. Well, all the survivors instantly regained their vigor, because Wan Chao's subordinates were really useless. Everyone probably thought that Wan Chao's newly recruited thugs were usually outlaws who fought valiantly and ruthlessly on a daily basis, gangsters and the like. But in fact, these people were really honest people who usually held their heads against each other, and didn't even dare to look at women. These people were holding baseball bats in their trembling hand. They didn't look intimidating at all. They would be lucky if they didn't get beaten up by these people. Seeing these thugs cowering in fear, the survivors simply didn't put them in their eyes. Especially when some arrogant people realized that many of these honest people in front of them were once bullied by them and didn't dare to fight back, they looked down on these honest people even more. If it weren't for the military governor's prestige suppressing them, and their desire for a temporary camp, they would have escaped long ago. At this moment, the dark level Yuan Shun, the octopus robot, let out an earth-shattering sound. It sounded like a train whistle, but this sound was far darker and more terrifying. It was like a whistle from hell, striking the souls of every survivor, causing them to tremble from the depths of their souls. Run! Just like how Li Yi was the first to break Wang Chao's rule in the VIP room, a fat official broke the silence of the survivors. The whistle was like a whip that lashed at his soul, causing him to fall into a state of confusion. He was the first to attempt to break through the human wall that Wang Chao had set up. This action of the fat official became a signal, and in an instant, the majority of the survivors followed behind him, and began to charge towards the human wall formed by the honest people. Only a few of the survivors who were still rational looked on coldly. Humph, this military governor and the gangster that he appointed are all trash. What kind of trash is he recruiting? He didn't want the strong ones, and instead chose a bunch of useless honest people. And these idiots who rushed out, do they think that they will be safe just by escaping? Without the protection of that sword wielder, they will become food for those monsters sooner or later. Yu Suawei was a member of the cold and indifferent faction, and when he saw the huge commotion among the survivors, he spoke with disdain. Suawei, if you really look down on these honest people, then I, your father, will look down on you as well. Yu Mutian, who was sitting beside Yu Suawei, laughed coldly. Let me ask you, do you know who were the culprits of the 10 most brutal massacres in the history of New China? Who? Yu Suawei was taken aback. He didn't know why his father would ask him such a question. Let me tell you, they are the honest people that you are talking about. Yu Mutian smacked Yu Suawei's head. Bring our men and help that Wang Chao to stabilize the situation. Why? It's best if we let them all escape. I want to see that admiral's expression of defeat, Yu Suawei said with confusion and unhappiness. He didn't know why, but he didn't like this military governor. You idiot, it's true that these survivors are the military governor's men now, but who knows who they will belong to after a while. Yu Mutian said angrily. I got it. Dad, I'll go now. Yu Suawei chuckled and rushed out with the 8 soldiers. Just like what Yu Mutian said, if you are interested in researching the 10 most brutal massacres in New China, you will find that all the media outlets will write the same sentence when describing these massacres. According to the neighbors of the murderers were honest people who didn't even dare to step on an ant. Who would have thought that they would be so cruel? Therefore, in this world, those who usually looked very fierce were actually the most cowardly people. When they were threatened by a stronger opponent, they would only kneel on the ground and beg for mercy, or even pee in their pants. As for those who were usually well-behaved and allowed themselves to be bullied, they would pick up their knives and use the most vicious methods to dismember those who insulted them. Why was this happening? It didn't make sense. The reason was simple. Honest people were used to being honest and had been bullied many times. As a result, they would suppress the pain and anger in their hearts. Once this limit was exceeded, or when someone deliberately used something to ignite it, this continued anger would turn into a huge bomb, and everyone who had bullied him would perish together with him. This was the method Gohan told Wan Chao. Wan Chao wanted Wan Chao to pick those who were honest and had been bullied by others to join his team. Then, he would tell them that the reason why they were bullied was because they were timid and didn't dare to do what a man should do. There was an opportunity in front of them. As long as they listened to Wang Chao's orders and beat up those who dared to cross the line, they would no longer be the same people when they arrived at the temporary camp. You will be the people who bullied you in the past. You will be able to bully those who bullied you in the past. You will be able to take revenge for the humiliation you suffered. It had to be said that Wang Chao's words were like a fatal bait to the honest people. They were all provoked by Wang Chao's words to the point that their blood was boiling. They could not wait to rush up and teach those people who bullied them a lesson. In the eyes of others, these honest people were trembling because they were afraid. But in reality, these honest people were in a state of extreme excitement. They were so excited that they couldn't control their hands. As a result, something unexpected happened. These honest people who didn't fight back and didn't dare to say a word even if their wives were NTR'd suddenly became bloodthirsty demons. They raised the baseball bat in their hands and smashed it into the head of the first survivor who tried to break through the human wall. After that, there was nothing fancy about it, but it was filled with blood. These honest people didn't care about their own defense at all, as they picked up their baseball bats and smashed them on the heads of the survivors. There were 2 or 3 survivors who punched one of the honest people in the head in an attempt to force him to dodge. Who knew that the honest person didn't even try to dodge and took the 3 punches head-on. Then, like a mad tiger, he smashed his baseball bat into the temple of the survivors who attacked him. The 3 survivors immediately cried out in pain as they lay on the ground and struggled. It seemed like their injuries weren't light. However, the number of honest people was still a little lacking. Although they had baseball bats, they were still unable to deal with the survivors who outnumbered them by several times. Just as the wall was about to be broken through, Yu Suawei brought 8 elite soldiers and charged in. These elite soldiers were experts in martial arts. Every punch of theirs was aimed at the most sensitive and painful parts of a normal person. Once a person was hit by one of these elite soldiers, they would have to groan on the ground for at least 10 minutes before they could stand up again. Fleeting Calendar and Yu Hao stared at the scene with their mouths agape. They had received orders from Gohan to stay where they were and protect the survivors from Yuan Ko. But they didn't expect the survivors to start fighting amongst themselves. No, we can't let them continue fighting. Fleeting Calendar wanted King Yu to take control of the situation, but was held back by Yu Hao. Brother Fleeting Calendar, the mission given to us by our leader is to fight against Yuan Ko. Look, my father and grandfather have already taken action. Sure enough, following the direction of Yu Hao's finger, the 8 soldier kings, led by Yu Suawei, had already charged into the heart of the civil strife. The situation was finally under control after the elite soldiers entered the fray. The survivors were terrified and held their heads in their hands, not daring to charge at the wall anymore. Thank you for your help, General Yu. Wan Chao wiped the sweat off his forehead and thanked Yu Suawei when he saw that the situation was under control and that his mission was completed. It's all right, it's all right. Yu Suawei patted Wang Chao on the shoulder. Brother Wang, Comrade Wang, my father would like to have a word with you. Would you do me the honor? Yes, yes. Of course. Of course. Wang Chao replied with a smile. Chapter 581. General Yu, may I know why you're looking for me? Wang Chao asked Yu Mutian in a flattering manner. His attitude was even more respectful than when he was talking to Gohan. Yu Mutian was one of the most influential people in the entire city of Wuhan. Wang Chao had never imagined that he would be able to speak to such an influential person. Wang Chao had no choice but to flatter Yu Mutian because of his habits from before the apocalypse. Good news. Good news. Yu Mutian smiled and gestured for Wang Chao to take a seat on the cement slab beside him. Wang Chao was overwhelmed by Yu Mutian's flattery, and he only dared to place half his butt on the cement. Leader Wang, I didn't think that there would be a hero like you in the WH city. It's a pity that I didn't get to know you a few years ago, Yumutian said with a smile. It was as though he truly regarded Wang Chao as a hero. I wouldn't dare. General Yu, please tell me what you need. As long as I can do it, I will do it for you. Wang Chao replied excitedly. Well said, well said. Yumutian patted Wang Chao's hand and said, Since Leader Wang is such a hero, I'll be frank with you. That little fellow called the Admiral is really messing around. How dare he manage so many survivors? If not for Leader Wang's timely intervention, who knows how many of these pitiful commoners would have died at the hands of those monsters. Wang Chao didn't say anything. After all, Gohan was his superior, and he couldn't say anything. However, the look of disdain on Gohan's face betrayed Wang Chao. When Yumutian saw Wang Chao's expression, he knew that he had succeeded. Leader Wang, in my opinion, this team can't be controlled by this kid. It has to be controlled by mature adults like us. Yumutian tried to persuade Wang Chao, as though he was thinking about the safety of the survivors. Wang Chao's eyes lit up when he heard Yumutian's words. However, he still shrugged and said helplessly, General Yu, you can't say things like that. You've seen the commander's strength. If he really gets angry, we won't be a match for him even if we charge at him. How are we going to take control of the city from him? Leader Wang, you don't understand. Yumutian sneered. The military governor's strength is all because of the sword in his hand. With that sword, he's the true sword bearer. Yu Hao, my grandson, is also a sword bearer. I've already asked my grandson. He said that as long as you have a sword that can become a sword maiden, and then synchronize with the sword maiden, you can become a sword wielder. But in this wasteland, where can I find swords that can become sword maidens? Wang Chao smiled bitterly. I won't hide it from you. I've collected quite a few swords along the way, but there isn't a single one that can make me a sword wielder. Sigh. Why do we need to look for them? We can just use the ones we already have. Yumutian's face was filled with viciousness. As long as we take the swords in the military governor's and the fleeting calendar's hands, we'll become sword wielder as well. Leader Wang, as long as the two of us work together, we can ambush the military governor the moment he lets his guard down. Even if the military governor is Dian Wei, without his halberds, he's nothing more than a mortal. He'll be stabbed to death by a bunch of soldiers. Yumutian sneered as he took out a small pistol. Furthermore, I have this with me. Kids will always be kids. Don't you know how to search properly? Leader Wang, after we succeed, the fleeting calendar's sword maiden will be yours. I only want the military governor's sword maiden. What do you think? Whether you're a dragon or a worm, it's all up to you. Yumutian's words were like a poppy flower, completely attracting Wang Chao's attention. Fine. If I don't die, I'll live forever. I'll do it. Yumutian and Wang Chao, the old man who had been saved by Gohan from certain death, and the old man who had been entrusted with an important task by Gohan, had teamed up to betray Gohan and the fleeting calendar. Just as Yumutian and Wang Chao were discussing their despicable plot, a loud sound came from the sky. What's going on? Yumutian stood up and asked loudly. Dad, it's Gohan. He's fighting with the robot octopus. Yusue replied as he handed a pair of binoculars to Yumutian. Wang Chao had also brought a pair of binoculars with him. No one knew where he had gotten them from. With the help of the binoculars, Yumutian and Wang Chao could clearly see the battle between Gohan and the robot octopus. Through the binoculars, they could see Gohan standing on the ground, and the sword energy in his hands flew towards the robot octopus. When the sword energy flew across the ground, it raised a huge cloud of dust. The concrete was like soft tofu in front of the sword energy, and it was directly sliced into countless pieces. Even several buildings were pierced by the sword energy. The terrifying power of the sword energy left Yumutian and Wang Chao dumbfounded. It was too terrifying. It turned out that the military governor was so powerful. However, this also strengthened Yu Mutian's determination to obtain Gohan's heaven-reliant sword. As long as he had the strength to do so, he would even be able to sit on the seat of Yanjing City. If Gohan's strength left Yu Mutian speechless and drooling, then the robot octopus's strength made them feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. The surface of the octopus robot seemed to have an invisible protective shield. When Gohan's powerful sword chi hit the octopus robot's protective shield, it was like a stone falling on the surface of the water. Other than a few ripples, there was no other movement. Not even a hair of the octopus robot was cut off. Although Gohan was like a fly to the robot octopus, it couldn't help but want to kill a fly that was buzzing in its ears. The octopus robot's eyes widened, and the two dark red death rays that had just destroyed the world shot out again towards Gohan. If Gohan were to be touched even a little bit, it would not end well for him. However, although the dark red death rays were light in name, they were actually slower than light. They were only a few times the speed of sound, so there was still room for Luo Yunyang to dodge them. Gohan was like a flea that kept jumping around on the ground. Although the death rays were powerful, they couldn't do anything to Gohan. After a while, the robot octopus gave up on using the death rays to deal with Gohan. It was like using a cannon to kill a mosquito. It was useless. When Gohan saw that the robot octopus had given up on its attack, he seemed to be very pleased with himself. He stood in place and laughed at the robot octopus. At this moment, more than 10 rays of light suddenly shot out from the octopus robot's head. Unlike the dark red death rays from before, these rays of light were aqua blue. They looked like a type of laser, and their speed was almost as fast as the speed of light. Gohan had no room to dodge at all. In an instant, he was hit by these blue rays of light, and there was a crisp sound of explosions all around his body. Under the watchful eyes of Yu Mutian and Wang Chao, Gohan fell to the ground. He seemed to have turned into a corpse. Then, a few small tentacles extended from the robot octopus's body. They tied up Gohan's body and pulled him into the robot octopus's body. F***CK. He's dead? Yu Mutian's hands trembled, and his binoculars fell to the ground. He and Wang Chao had just schemed against Gohan. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that Gohan was already dead. You damned military governor! How can you die now? Even if you die, you should defeat this robot octopus first. Then, you should offer up your sword lady before you die. How can you disobey the orders of the organization? Let's go. We have to find Hao and get him to take us away from here. It's too dangerous here. Yu Mutian, who had been calm a moment ago, immediately asked to leave. Wait. General Yu, wait. Wang Chao grabbed Yu Mutian's shoulder. This action made Yu Mutian extremely unhappy. Who was Wang Chao? How dare he grab his shoulder? What a filthy thing! Yu Mutian was extremely displeased. Of course, he didn't show his emotions on his face. General Yu, the military governor, told me that he would find a way to enter the robot octopus's body. No matter what happens, we shouldn't panic. We should just wait here for him to return. Do you think that the military governor did this on purpose? Wang Chao asked softly. Yu Mutian's face turned red. Leader Wang, why didn't you tell me this earlier? Indeed, Gohan had been captured by the robot octopus. However, the robot octopus's blue laser beams were not to be trifled with. They struck Gohan's shield until it was only left with 10% of its energy. Furthermore, the speed of the blue laser beams was extremely fast. Against Gohan, Gohan didn't have the ability to dodge. Even if he didn't put on an act, he would be captured by the robot octopus sooner or later. As the saying goes, no matter how strong a house's defenses were, it couldn't stop the owner from bringing a thief into the house. Under the robot octopus's guidance, Gohan easily passed through the robot octopus's shield and was thrown into a metal cage. Gohan wasn't alone in the cage. There were more than 20 people in the cage, and their faces were filled with fear. It seemed like they were the most difficult survivors to save out of the 850 survivors. As long as he could save them, Guhan would have accomplished his mission. Chapter 582. Although this nether level was not an opponent that a treasure-level swordsman could deal with, as time passed, there would always be some people who habitually sought death and tried to provoke this undefeatable Yuan Ko. Thus, there was a sword maiden who was a treasure-level swordsman with an explosive defense. After withstanding a few blue lasers and surviving, she was caught by the octopus robot and placed in the basket under its stomach. However, although this treasure-level swordsman did not die, his limbs were crippled and his sword maiden was broken. After being caught from the octopus robot's basket and placed into its stomach, he experienced inhumane torture and ended the instant's dungeon with his own death. This post mainly described the inhumane treatment that the sword-bearer had suffered. This was also the main selling point of the post and the focus of the players. However, Guhan saw something unusual. As long as one could resist the attack of the blue laser, the octopus robot would invite them in on its own. There was no need to break through the protective shield that was impossible for sword-bearers of the artifact level at all. This was the octopus robot's biggest weakness. When Guhan was caught by the octopus robot and placed into the basket, everything was destined for the octopus robot's tragic end. Guhan counted the number of people. All 21 survivors were in the basket. Although there were men and women in the basket, there were people of all ages. However, if one observed carefully, they would find that the people in the basket were basically young people below the age of 30. There was not a single person above the age of 30. It seemed that the octopus robot's taste was biased towards young people. It liked fresher humans. The people in the basket all had blank expressions. They had completely lost hope for survival. They lay lazily in the cage, looking as if they were ready to die. Only the mother and daughter beside Guhan, from their faces, Guhan could see the desire to live. "Young man, if there are tentacles coming out from that hole later, you must hide." Perhaps seeing that Guhan was young enough, the mother kindly reminded Guhan and did not say anything else. According to the description of the sword-bearer, the narrow hole at the top of the basket was actually connected to the stomach of the octopus robot. Not long after, a small tentacle would stretch out from the stomach of the octopus robot and grab the human inside. You could imagine a small mouth below the human body eating the sausage. However, once the sausage entered the human body, there was no way to get out. It would stay inside and be squeezed for juice. That's right, it was juicing. According to the unlucky sword-bearer's recollection, after his body passed through the tight, plump and wrinkled hole, he was pressed on a chopping board. Mechanical hands continuously cut off parts of his body, pumped them into juice, and sent them into a hole similar to the gas tank of a car. Therefore, the sword-bearer suspected that the octopus robot was actually using human flesh as its energy source. Therefore, it needed to constantly capture humans and pump them into juice, turning them into fuel for the robot's operation. Once a human's body was completely dissected and pumped into juice, the mechanical hands would capture a new human from the basket and insert them into the body, repeating the process of squeezing juice. As he said that, the tentacle stretched out again. The delicate closed hole at the top of the basket opened like a chrysanthemum bud, and a tentacle as thick as an arm stretched out from the bud. Seeing the appearance of this tentacle, the basket that was originally as quiet as a pool of stagnant water suddenly boiled up. Apart from Guhan, all the humans showed fear on their faces. They kept leaning against the edge of the basket, as if this could escape the tentacle's grasp. The tip of this tentacle emitted a red light, which should be something like an infrared camera installed. This tentacle first stayed in control for a moment, then the red light shone brightly. It went straight for the little girl who was being held by her mother. "Mom, the tentacle is coming again. Ruru is scared. Help, Mom." The cute little girl, who looked similar to Qing Pin, saw that she had become the target of the tentacle. She grabbed her mother's collar tightly, and her young body was trembling, showing the great fear in her heart. But this tentacle eventually wrapped around the little girl's waist, and then pulled back, trying to pull the little girl into its stomach. "Let go of my child, I'll kill you." Seeing that her daughter was about to disappear into the stomach of the octopus robot, the mother erupted with great strength. Her arms, which did not have any visible muscles, burst out with bulging veins. She grabbed her daughter's armpits tightly with both hands, and refused to let the tentacles grab her daughter. In a short second, the mother and the tentacle actually formed a standoff, and no one could get the little girl. But this was only temporary. After all, the power of the tentacle came from the machine, and the power of the machine was not something that humans could resist. A second later, the sound of bones breaking could be heard from the mother's 10 fingers. Then, she lost control of her daughter. Even though the daughter was grabbing her mother's collar tightly, it was to no avail. The mother's collar was easily torn open, revealing a large piece of white flesh inside, and a white steamed bun that was constantly shaking. If it was any other time, the mother would definitely cover her exposed body, but at this moment she did not care. She madly rushed towards her daughter who was getting away from her, trying to snatch her daughter back. It was also at this moment that a figure suddenly appeared in front of the mother. The human who had just been caught and lying on the ground like a dead person suddenly jumped up and grabbed the little girl's waist. Then, together with the little girl, like a cucumber, they were pulled into the tight hole in the robot's lower body. Roo-roo! The mother let out a heart-wrenching scream. The sound was so sad that even animals could not help but cry if they heard it. Gohan carried the little girl all the way through the tightly wrapped tunnel for a considerable distance, and was thrown into a narrow space. This space was about a dozen square meters in size, and there was a faint dark red light coming from the surrounding walls. Through this small light, Gohan could see countless clothes and various gadgets like keys that were randomly thrown around him, and a lot of hair, human hair in various senses. There was a platform in the middle of the room, and he could see 5 or 6 mechanical hands working on it. It looked like a skilled butcher, constantly cutting up the flesh to be sold on the chopping board. But this time, it was not a pig that was being cut up, but a human. Looking at the northwest corner of the room, there was a pile of things that looked like a volleyball. The reason why he thought it was a volleyball was because the light in this space was too dim, so he could not see it clearly. This was only for ordinary humans. In Gohan's eyes, he could see very clearly that the pile of things in the corner was none other than the hideous, hairless human heads that had been severed from their bodies. Wah wah wah! A mournful sobbing sound came from Gohan's side. Gohan immediately hugged the little girl in his arms. At this moment, the robotic arms on the platform suddenly spread out. One of the robots grabbed a human head that looked like a volleyball and threw it into the western corner mentioned before. It merged with the previous human head and became a new volleyball. At the same time, almost all the mechanical hands began to grab Gohan. Their division of labor was very clear. Some grabbed the hands, some grabbed the feet, and some grabbed Gohan's head. Once caught by these mechanical hands, ordinary people would not be able to break free. Unfortunately, Gohan was not an ordinary person. The scene here made Gohan, who was used to seeing disgusting scenes in the core area of Yuzhong City, feel a little nauseous. Gohan pulled out his heaven-reliant sword. With a single slash, he cut the insufferably arrogant mechanical hands into 2. The mechanical hands that were left with only half of their body parts seemed to have never encountered such a situation before. They wriggled in the air like earthworms, not knowing what to do. Trash! Gohan gave a cold harumph. He held the little girl with one hand and grabbed the heaven-reliant sword with the other. Then, he leaped up to the ceiling. He cut a hole in the ceiling and leaped into it. After a while, a series of roaring sounds could be heard from the inside of the entire machine. Then, the octopus robot let out a shrill whistle. The 3 legs of the octopus robot lost control. The entire robot directly lost the strength to support itself and fell to the ground. A dimensional vortex split open in the sky and the octopus robot was sucked in. All that was left were the humans lying on the ground. They looked around at their surroundings, not knowing what to do. What had happened? Why was that terrifying robot gone? However, it seemed like they had been saved. Everyone began to cheer, rejoicing that they had escaped with their lives. Only a despairing mother remained on the ground. She refused to believe that her daughter was dead. No way. Ruru is not dead. She must still be alive. The mother comforted herself, even though she knew it was all fake. Mom. Mom. The mother was stunned. Wait a minute. Why does this sound like Ruru's voice? The mother raised her head and saw her daughter throwing herself into her arms, sobbing, and a man who was incomparably dazzling under the sunlight was looking at her with a warm expression. It's okay. It's okay. The man said with a smile. The mother blushed and hugged Ruru tightly in her arms. Ruru cried out, "Mom, you are suffocating me." Only then did the mother remember that her clothes were wide open. Her chest was exposed, so she could only force Ruru to become her human bra. Chapter 583. When they saw the mighty super octopus robot suddenly kneel on the ground and disappear, everyone felt that Gohan had become a godlike existence. When Gohan returned with 21 survivors, almost all the survivors, even those who had been beaten black and blue by Wan Chao's subordinates, couldn't help but cheer. At this moment, everyone believed that Gohan was a superhuman. He was the savior who would lead humanity to survival. At this moment, Gohan's prestige rose to the peak in everyone's hearts. Even if Gohan chased them away, they probably wouldn't escape. If such a terrifying robot giant was destroyed, then what else was there to be afraid of? Fortunately, they hadn't seen Loki or the Nether River Patriarch. Otherwise, they wouldn't have thought so. When the 21 survivors joined the team, Gohan's team had a total of 451 people. They were only 199 people away from the grand goal of 650 people. These 199 people were now walking towards Gohan. Comrade Military Governor. Yumutian and Yu Sowei walked over with a face full of smiles. He then said to Gohan with a look of admiration, "Comrade Military Governor, your abilities are truly admirable. From today onwards, this world belongs to you young people. I've always felt that humans don't have any saviors, but after seeing you, Commander Comrade, I know that humans still need a savior to survive. This old man believes that in the future, your name will definitely be at the top of the list. Your name will shine for all eternity and go down in history. I'm indeed a savior, but it's not me. It's the person behind me." Gohan sneered as he thought to himself. He was just an illusory passerby, and the real savior was actually the Sword Ancestor's fleeting year calendar that had been silent behind him. Come to think of it, he seemed to have stolen the limelight from Fleeting Year Calendar. The main character should have been Fleeting Year Calendar. P.S. This dungeon is about to end. I originally wanted to write about Fleeting Year Calendar, but I ended up writing about Gohan instead. The author's writing skills are really bad. What a husky, the Fleeting Year Calendar in history was not as successful as this one. If what was written in the history books was true, then the Fleeting Year Calendar had only managed to save a little more than 100 people on that day. Moreover, there were still people with ulterior motives trying to cause trouble. They were either trying to escape on their own, trying to usurp power, or trying to kill the Fleeting Calendar and steal the King of Yuzgo-Jian's sword so that they could wield the sword themselves. In the end, Fleeting Year Calendar relied on his own strength or luck to create the first sanctuary after the apocalypse to accommodate more than 1,000 people. However, he was ambushed by the robot from before. Fleeting Year Calendar was caught off guard, and the survivors that he had painstakingly gathered became food for the robot. Fleeting year calendar could only bring a few dozen survivors and a dozen newly promoted sword-bearers back to Wuhan City. This period of time was of the utmost importance to fleeting time. According to the memories of the only sword-bearer who had followed the sword progenitor all the way from Wuhan City to Yanjing City, it was during this period of time that fleeting time had transformed from an innocent and kind lad into a middle-aged man who could understand the world. This period of time was of the utmost importance to fleeting time's character. Comrade Military Governor! Comrade Military Governor? Yu Tian called out to Gohan when he noticed that he was in a daze. Only then did Gohan snap out of his daze and he waved his hands. You must be joking, Senior Yu. How can I leave my name in the annals of history? I'm afraid that my name, Military Governor, won't be recorded in history. Comrade Military Governor, you're too humble. Ha 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 ha. Yu Tian laughed dryly. Oh right, Senior Yu, is there something urgent that you need me for? Don't tell me you're just trying to flatter me? Gohan pretended to be unaware of Yu Tian's intentions. Yes, there is. Yu Tian coughed. I just received a call from a few of my subordinates. They say that there are about 200 survivors gathered at the headquarters of Hubei's military, and they're waiting for me. This old man is thinking of bringing them to the temporary camp that Admiral Comrade mentioned. Or we can just stay at the headquarters. There are complete defensive facilities there, as well as a lot of weapons and ammunition. We can use them to hold our ground. Moreover, it is also in the city, so it is more convenient to find food and survivors. This old man feels that it is better to stay at the headquarters. What do you think, Comrade Military Governor? I've been waiting for you to say that. Gohan remained silent for a long time before speaking up. I can't do that. I think that the defenses might be useful against humans, but it's useless against monsters. Furthermore, the city is where the monsters gather. It'll be dangerous for the survivors to stay here. We'll have to retreat to the mountains. That's the only place where we'll be safe. In fact, how could Gohan not know what Yu Tian was planning? The headquarters of Hubei's military was Yu Tian's territory. If he stayed there, Yu Tian would have many ways to kill him and snatch the sword lady from him. But then again, even if Gohan agreed to let Yu Tian stay in the headquarters, it wouldn't matter. This was because Gohan's goal was to increase the number of survivors to 621. As long as they reunited with the survivors in the headquarters, Gohan's goal would be achieved. All he had to do was shout that he wanted to leave, and Gohan would be able to leave the dungeon. Even if Yu Tian came up with a trap, it would be useless against Gohan. However, Gohan didn't like Yu Tian. He didn't want to let Yu Tian achieve his goal so easily. He wanted to anger Yu Tian, so he rejected Yu Tian's suggestion. Alright. Yu Tian's smile froze. However, he was still a sly old fox. He knew that now wasn't the time to refute Gohan. He would wait until they reached the headquarters of Hubei's military. Yu Tian nodded and said, since that's the case, let's go to the headquarters and save all my old friends. We'll go to the mountain together. The great ancestor said that the villages surround the cities. Then I'll have to trouble Senior Yu to lead the way. Gohan said gratefully. Under Gohan's command, the entire team started to move towards the headquarters of Hubei's military. When the team reached the headquarters of Hubei's military, they were greeted by a huge wasteland. All of the buildings had collapsed, and weapons were scattered all over the ground. There were also many rotting corpses on the ground. From the looks of it, this place should have been destroyed on the first day of the apocalypse. How could there be 200 survivors in such a place? The survivors in the team didn't believe this. However, Yu Tian and Gohan were calm. Yu Tian had already contacted the headquarters of Hubei's military, so he naturally knew what was going on. Gohan, on the other hand, had read all sorts of guides and strategies, so he naturally knew what was going on. Senior Yu, where are the survivors you mentioned? When Gohan saw that Yu Tian was silent, he knew that he had to cooperate with him. Otherwise, Yumutian wouldn't be able to tell him the truth. Please follow me. Yumutian waved his hand, and 8 of his soldiers ran into a half-collapsed building with a restaurant sign on it. They surrounded a pillar in the middle of the building. Yumutian led Gohan to the pillar and patted it. Military Governor, the remaining survivors are all here. Here? Gohan said in confusion. In fact, he had long understood that this pillar was similar to the elevator entrance of the Yuzhong City Emergency Response Center. There was an elevator hidden inside, and it could be used to enter the underground fortifications of the Hubei Military General Headquarters through the elevator to command the entire city's street battles. It sounded like a good plan, but Gohan didn't think it was necessary. Since ancient times, China's wars had always been about the overall situation. Once a faction gained the upper hand, they would be able to win easily. There was no need for urban warfare. During the War of Liberation, have you ever seen the Baldies fighting street battles that lasted more than a month? It was rare for them to last for 10 days. Forget it, it's taboo to say it. This elevator was the reason why Gohan had to bring Yumutian along. This was because the depth of this underground fortification was more than 100 meters, and there was even a meter-thick armor protecting it. With Gohan's current strength, he didn't have the ability to cut through this armor. If no one opened the entrance from the inside, Gohan wouldn't be able to enter the interior of the fortification without a day or two, and bring away the survivors. Therefore, Yumutian was the key to opening the door. Otherwise, Gohan wouldn't have come out with just the 10 of them. Hello. Deputy Division Commander Wang? I'm Yumutian. Open the entrance immediately. We have more than 400 survivors who want to come in and take refuge. Don't talk to me about food. Just open the door. I'll think of a way to find food for you. Yumutian knocked on the pillar 3 times, then pressed his finger on a black spot that looked like a stain. A small door opened, revealing a telephone. Yumutian shouted at the telephone, and the side of the pillar opened, revealing the elevator that was still shining brightly. Chapter 584. Gohan did not follow Yumutian's instructions. He was the first to take the elevator and enter the headquarters of the Hubei army. Instead, he used the excuse of ensuring that all the survivors were in a safe place before leaving to silence Yumutian. Yumutian thought for a moment. It was a good thing that Gohan was the last to come down. This way, he would have enough time to make arrangements in the underground fortifications. And so, Yumutian led his men into the underground fortifications, followed by the rest of the survivors. After all the survivors had entered, Gohan led Fleeting Calendar and Yu Hao into the underground fortifications. Comrade Military Governor, you're finally here. Welcome, welcome. Gohan saw Yumutian's smiling face the moment he stepped out of the elevator. Beside Yumutian was a bald man with the rank of senior colonel. He should be the Deputy Division Commander Wang whom Yumutian had spoken to on the phone. General Military Governor, welcome, welcome. Deputy Division Commander Wang stepped forward to shake hands with the military governor the moment he saw him. The military governor shook hands briefly before letting go of Deputy Division Commander Wang's hand. Don't stand on ceremony. From now on, we are a family. Let's rest here for a while before moving to the Dragon Group's temporary camp on Mount Mulan. I guarantee that it will be much safer there, Gohan said with a smile. This. Deputy Division Commander Wang looked at Yumutian suspiciously. Yumutian nodded and smiled bitterly. Comrade Military Governor, Deputy Division Commander Wang still doesn't know that I've agreed to go to Mount Mulan with you. But don't worry, I, Yumutian, am a man of my words. Since we are a family, we will naturally move together. Gohan had already lost interest in the hypocrisy of these fellows and asked very directly. Then, can I announce that everyone has officially joined together and become a team? Of course. Of course. Although Yumutian and the others felt that Gohan's words were strange, they nodded in agreement. This was the answer that Gohan needed. System notification. The total number of survivors you have saved has reached 650. You have successfully saved all the survivors and achieved an SSS rank dungeon evaluation. You can shout that you want to leave. That will automatically end the instance dungeon and you will return to the instance dungeon's completion center. Please note, you have reached the dungeon's highest achievement and can no longer stay in the dungeon. You will leave the dungeon in 30 seconds. Have a good day. This boring and unchallenging dungeon had finally come to an end. There were only 30 seconds left before they could leave this place. Gohan finally didn't have to wear this boring mask on his face anymore. Wan Chao, come here for a moment, Gohan shouted. Wan Chao, who was reprimanding a few survivors, immediately ran over. Leader, what can I do for you? Wan Chao asked flatteringly. He thought Gohan had something to tell him. Wan Chao, you're scum. Gohan looked at Wan Chao's eyes, which were gradually becoming a little frightened, and said coldly, if you weren't a little useful, I would have killed you when I rescued you. But now that you've used up your usefulness, you can die. Wan Chao's body trembled. He turned around and tried to escape. However, no matter how fast he was, he couldn't be faster than Gohan's blade. Wan Chao's head flew into the air and landed on the ground. You need to be judged according to the law. However, I forgot to tell you that the new law hasn't been made yet. It will be 12 years later when the first China's emergency survival law is announced. As a sword wielder, I can sentence you to death on the spot, Gohan said as the heavenly sword in his hand glowed with a silver light. There wasn't a single drop of blood on it. Comrade Military Governor, what are you doing? You actually dared to kill people. Have you forgotten what this place is? Deputy Division Commander Wang saw this scene and immediately took out his pistol. He had never seen Gohan fight, so naturally, he could not imagine how terrifying Gohan's strength was. If it wasn't for Yu Mutian's repeated requests, he wouldn't have bothered to put on an act with Gohan. Seeing that Gohan had killed someone, Deputy Division Commander Wang, who felt that he had something on Gohan, immediately took out his pistol and was ready to kill Gohan righteously. Unfortunately, the speed at which Deputy Division Commander Wang pulled out his gun was faster than the speed at which he pulled out his gun. As a result, the second head flew up and landed on the ground, coincidentally matching Wang Chao's head. In the blink of an eye, the two men died under Gohan's sword. The survivors, the soldiers, fleeting calendar, and Yu Hao were all horrified. They couldn't understand how the military governor of the Dragon Group, who had been trying to protect humanity, had suddenly turned into a murderer. Well done. Well done. Yu Mutian slapped his old bones and said loudly, Comrade Military Governor, well done. The two of them actually colluded with each other to kidnap all the survivors in an attempt to rebel against the enemy. They deserve to be executed. Comrade Military Governor, well done. Well done. This old man thanks you for your help. Yu Mutian was really cunning and quick to react. As soon as he saw the situation, he immediately drew a clear line between himself and Wang Chao. He even took the initiative to claim that he was the mastermind of the murder. This was because he had already sensed the killing intent in Gohan's heart. Although he couldn't understand why Gohan would kill someone in public for no reason, he knew that Gohan would kill someone in public. However, Yu Mutian knew that he had to be on Gohan's side if he wanted to live. He had to be the mastermind. In order to make him the scapegoat, Gohan wouldn't be able to kill him. After all, Gohan still needed him to convince the rest of the people in the base. In the blink of an eye, Yu Mutian understood everything and made the correct decision. He was indeed a cunning old fox. If there was another person beside Yu Mutian, he would definitely see that Yu Mutian's forehead was covered in sweat. Boring. Gohan looked at the time. There were only 10 seconds left before they had to leave. Looking at this old thing made him feel disgusted. It was as if he was looking at another version of himself. The heavenly sword flashed coldly once again. Yumutian thought that he had stabilized Gohan, but he realized that the entire sky seemed to be spinning. He knew that this was a sign that his head had left his body. According to modern scientific research, if a person's head was cut off cleanly with a sharp knife, the person would remain conscious for about 4 to 5 seconds. After that, the person would fall into a state of being on the verge of death for 30 seconds. In the few seconds that Yumutian's head was flying in the air, he could think of many things. How did this happen? Yumutian couldn't understand how things had turned out this way. He had already arranged for a banquet to be held. He had added a special military poison to Gohan's drink. 1 drop was enough to kill an elephant. To be safe, Yumutian had specially asked Deputy Commander-in-Chief Wang to pour an entire bottle of poison into Gohan's mouth. As long as this commander drank the wine, his sword and his superpower would be mine. Everything had been planned so well, and the feast at Hongmen had been set up, but why did this Liu Bang suddenly rush in and chop off Xiang Yu's head with a single stroke of his sword? This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Yumutian thought to himself in grief and indignation as he took his last breath. Grandfather! Yu Hao cried out in grief. The wishful sword was released and it slashed at Gohan's head. With a wave of his hand, Gohan pushed the wishful sword to the side. There were only 3 seconds left before the 30 seconds were up. At that moment, a rift suddenly appeared in the air above the dumbfounded fleeting calendar's head. Is this a dimensional rift? Gohan's eyes widened. He didn't expect such an Easter egg to appear in the last 3 seconds. However, dimensional rifts usually produced Yuan-Ko. This was especially true at the beginning of the apocalypse. A single dimensional rift could produce dozens of Yuan-Kos. If he left, all the humans here, including Kenzu, would probably die at the hands of Yuan-Ko. Gohan couldn't help but feel a little regretful. It seemed that he had caused Fleeting Calendar's death in the dungeon again. However, to Gohan's surprise, no Yuan-Kos appeared from the dimensional rift. Only a snow-white lotus slowly descended from the dimensional rift and floated into Fleeting Calendar's palm. This is a creation divine spark. Gohan, who had seen a creation divine spark before, immediately recognized the origin of this white lotus. This white lotus, which had almost destroyed Yuzhong City, had actually come to this world through the dimensional rift on the 6th day of the apocalypse. What was more terrifying was that, if the dungeon's description was true, this white lotus in history was likely to have fallen into Kenzu's hands. This white lotus, which had caused the deaths of 3 desolate grade Yuan-Kos and caused Fleeting Calendar to be banished to this dimension, had actually belonged to Kenzu from the start. At this thought, Gohan couldn't help but shiver. He seemed to have smelled something shocking. Unfortunately, the 30-second countdown had ended. Gohan left the dungeon with endless confusion. When he saw the world again, he was already in the familiar yet unfamiliar dungeon settlement center. Respected player military governor, welcome to the dungeon settlement center. Settlement Officer 0791 is happy to serve you. Chapter 585. Are you 0791 Orjina-chan? Gohan squinted his eyes as he looked at the familiar cold-faced cashier. Who's Tomono Kakashi? I don't know her, 0791. 0791 blushed and pouted. Please don't use topics unrelated to the dungeon to harass the cashier. Otherwise, I can sue you for sexual harassment and apply for an electric shock as well as a suspension of your account for more than a month. Alright. As long as you're happy. Gohan had basically confirmed that this 0791 before him was Tomono Kakashi. However, he had no idea why she refused to admit it no matter what. 0791 looked like she was in her 20s. She was wearing a dark blue business suit and a pair of shiny black stockings. She had the image of an alluring mature lady. Could it be that every loli has the dream of a mature lady in their heart? Oh right, I forgot to mention that the theme of the dungeon settlement center seemed to be seaside. Behind Gohan was the majestic sea while he was sitting on a beach chair with 0791. Hello, respected player, military governor. Your dungeon Wuhan search has completed the data collection. Do you want to start settlement? You can also choose to enjoy the scenery here. The theme of our settlement center today is Honolulu, 0791 said in a formulaic manner. There's no need for that. Let's start settlement right away, Gohan gave the same old answer. Alright, starting settlement. Main Mission 1 completed. Main Mission 2 completed. All main missions completed. Total time taken, 2 hours 56 minutes 37 seconds. In the previous few dungeons that Gohan completed alone, there were more or less some anomalies in the main missions. It seemed like this dungeon was the first time Gohan had heard of the completion of all main missions. When Gohan thought of this, he could not help but sigh. He would not be used to it if there were no anomalies. Commencing battle record evaluation. All main missions completed. Mission time taken, 2 hours 56 minutes 37 seconds. Number of survivors saved, 650. Warning. Warning. Anomaly discovered. Anomaly discovered. The number of survivors in the instance dungeon mission does not match the number of survivors in the instance dungeon mission. The number of survivors in the instance dungeon mission does not match the number of survivors in the instance dungeon mission. The number of survivors in the instance dungeon mission does not match the number of survivors in the instance dungeon mission. There were 650 people in the instance dungeon mission. I didn't expect Gohan's flag to be raised so beautifully. Just a moment ago, I was complaining about how I wasn't used to not having any anomalies. Who would have thought that an anomaly would suddenly appear? Moreover, it was an SSS rank anomaly. It seemed like only the anomaly that I obtained from the Yuan Gojian sword during my first entry into the dungeon was comparable to this anomaly. But then again, how could this anomaly be an SSS rank anomaly? Wasn't it just a difference in the number of people and the number of people remaining? Wasn't this just a small anomaly? Gohan didn't believe it. Could it be that the previous players who completed this mission didn't kill a few survivors in the last 30 seconds before leaving the dungeon? There were so many perverts in this world, it was impossible for such a situation to not happen. Although he had doubts in his heart, Gohan had no choice but to wait for 0791's report to be processed. While he was waiting for the news, the originally bright sea sky suddenly darkened, as if it had instantly turned into night. However, in less than 10 seconds, the darkness ended and the sky returned to its original state. After waiting for another 5 minutes or so, 0791 finally recovered from its dull state and pouted in dissatisfaction. I say, Mr. Gohan, can't you make Jina-chan less worried? 0791's originally cold face suddenly revealed a sweet, Lolita-like smile. We haven't seen each other for so long, and the moment we meet, you give Jina-chan a big piece of news. Oh, now you admit that you're Jina-chan. You're not pretending to be 0791 anymore? Gohan looked at the obviously uncoordinated appearance and temperament of 0791 and teased her. Nonsense, Jina-chan only came here after receiving an anomaly report. The person who was talking to you just now is not Jina-chan. 0791 spoke like a frightened little rabbit. Alright, Gohan wasn't in the mood to tease her anymore. Let her be. Is this anomaly very serious? It actually allowed you to personally possess an NPC's body. Gohan asked curiously. Of course it's serious. Didn't Jina-chan say it already? Mr. Gohan, you've really made a big news. 0791 giggled. Did you notice that the entire sky darkened just now? I saw it. What's wrong? I heard that this dungeon's settlement center also has stars, the sun, the moon, and the 4 seasons. What's so strange about that? Gohan was puzzled. Hee hee, Mr. Lonefrost, if Gina-chan told you that it's not just the dungeon settlement center that has darkened, but the entire game world, including the main game world, the various dungeons, the Crusade Quest world, and all sorts of other strange worlds, all of the game worlds that I've created have all experienced 10 seconds of darkness, would you still think that this is a small piece of news? After saying this, 0791's eyes were fixed on Gohan's expression, trying to see Gohan's shocked expression. Sure enough, just as Tomono Kakaze had hoped, Gohan's face suddenly froze. The flesh on his face unconsciously twitched, and his tone became serious for the first time. Gina-chan, you're not joking, right? It's just an anomaly in this dungeon. How could it cause such a huge change? Why would I lie to you? 0791 rolled her eyes at Gohan. This may seem like a small change to you, but this change now affects the entire core program of the game. That's impossible. I just killed a few NPCs. I don't believe it. Could it be that no other players have done this before me? Could it be that they all caused such a huge anomaly? Gohan said, shaking his head. 0791 continued, Of course, Mr. Gohan, you're not the first pervert to do something like this. 0791 pouted. But not only did we save 650 survivors online, we also allowed the Rui Celestial Sword to appear. Finally, we shortened the mission world to less than 3 hours. Mr. Gohan, when all these conditions are put together, it's going to be a disaster. After hearing Tomono Kakaze's words, Gohan understood the cause of the anomaly. For example, a road trip, a wild animal zoo, a greedy tiger, a fearless wife, an old lady who dotes on her daughter, these are all very common things. When they happen on their own, no one would think much of it and think that it's not a big deal. But when all these things are put together, it's terrible. A certain female driver has already used the surveillance footage of what really happened at the exit of the wild animal zoo, as well as the life of her poor mother, to tell us how terrible it is when these things are put together. By the same logic, when the three things mentioned by 0791 come together, it caused this large-scale anomaly. According to 0791, there was originally an Easter egg in the system. When a player gathered all 650 survivors together within 3 hours, then this Easter egg would be triggered and a very good Easter egg reward would be obtained. It was similar to the Easter egg in the Wudong Peak dungeon, which gave 5 times the reward. Originally, this Easter egg had already been triggered when the countdown to 30 seconds had started. But according to the settings, this Easter egg would be scanned again at the end of the dungeon. This scan was bad. There were actually only 647 survivors, which did not match the actual number of 650 people. This caused a huge logical conflict. Then, after knowing how the system was structured, this logical conflict spread from the dungeon's settlement center all the way to Tomono Kakaze. According to Tomono Kakaze, she, who had not drunk Trensu for hundreds of years, suddenly had her head filled with Trensu, causing her to feel dizzy. As soon as Tomono Kakaze fainted, the whole world was plunged into darkness. Not only that, all the NPCs stopped talking to Gohan at that moment. The game's progress was also halted for 10 seconds. This was a huge bug. If not for the game's emergency deletion system, which deleted the source of the logical conflict, the whole game might have crashed. But Gina-chan still has to thank you. After explaining the cause and effect, Tomono Kakaze patted Gohan's shoulder generously. The whole research institute is in a mess now. Those scientists are so anxious that their hair is about to fall off. Especially that Xian. I heard he was fishing when the fish dragged his fishing rod into the water. I almost died of laughter when I saw it. Ha! Speaking of this, Tomono Kakaze laughed without a loli's impudence. This core AI was so happy to see Xian being humiliated. So, how do you plan to deal with this anomaly? After waiting for Tomono Kakaze to stop laughing, Gohan sighed and asked. It won't be like the Gojian Sword of the Evening Dungeon, Removing my Gojian sword of the king of you, right? He recalled the first time he entered. Don't worry. It won't be like the last time, only removing your Gojian sword of the king of you. Tamono Kakazi. Oh no, Tamono Kakazi. Oh, that's not right. Tamono Kakazi placed her black, meaty right leg on top of her left leg. Her smooth and delicate black thigh-covered calf swayed back and forth in front of Guhan. This time, it's not just the Gojian sword of the king of you. All the rewards of the dungeon are gone. 0791 said with a smile. Guhan's breath rushed to his throat. He almost choked to death. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. Gina-chan, I need a reason. A reason that can convince me. Okay, I'll give you a reason. Tamono Kakazi spread her hand. The Wuhan Great Search dungeon has been deleted. The system lost all the dungeon's data. I can't give you any rewards even if I want to. Chapter 586. Congratulations, you have broken the highest number of survivors in the dungeon Wuhan Great Search. You have obtained 200 reputation points. You have obtained the achievement, Reunion. Your name will spread throughout the world. Congratulations, you have broken the highest dungeon evaluation record for the dungeon Wuhan Great Search. You have obtained 200 reputation points, and you have obtained the title Wuhan Great Search. You stand at the peak of history, and your name will spread throughout the world. Ding dong. System notification. Broadcast to all channels. Player Military Governor has broken the highest number of survivors in the dungeon Wuhan Great Search. The original record is 621. The new record is 621. Let me congratulate Player Military Governor for creating a new era. Ding dong. System notification. Due to a system bug, the Wuhan Great Search dungeon has an unavoidable logic error. As the bug cannot be fixed, after careful consideration, from now on, the Wuhan Great Search dungeon will be taken offline. The dungeon tree will show a constant cleared status. Once the bug is fixed, the Wuhan Great Search dungeon will be reopened. Players, please inform each other. 4 different system announcements quickly spread throughout the entire game world, especially the last system announcement. Not only was it broadcasted to all channels 30 times, but it was also specially sent to every player's mailbox. In an instant, the entire game forum was in an uproar. Everyone was shocked by this unprecedented event in the history of Sword Maiden Online. What's going on? How could a dungeon with 200 years of history disappear in the blink of an eye? Similarly, Guhan did not expect the consequences of this anomaly to be so serious. According to Hina-chan, in order to save the core artificial intelligence that had fallen into a terminated state, the self-help program had to clear all the data in the Wuhan Great Search dungeon. In other words, after Guhan, unless it was remade again, the Wuhan Great Search dungeon would disappear and become a daily side dungeon that disappeared in the history of Sword Maiden Online. Furthermore, according to Hina-chan, it was impossible to reset the dungeon. Rather than reset a dungeon that everyone was tired of, it was better to create a new dungeon to attract more players. It seemed like Hina's brain had accumulated thousands of dungeon ideas. She was already very dissatisfied with the speed of creating a new dungeon every year. She desperately wanted to create the dungeon ideas in her head. Well, it seemed that Guhan could hang the title of Wuhan Top Searcher on his head until he died. He did not need to worry that someone would take this title away from him. Moreover, due to the fact that it was out of print, the value of this title could be multiplied by 10 times. Unfortunately, this title could not be transferred. Otherwise, Guhan would be able to make a fortune. Well, it's finally over. You can go now. Everyone, disperse. 0791 waved his hand, and Tamono Kakazi, who had possessed his body, prepared to leave. Wait, you can't leave yet. Unexpectedly, Guhan patted 0791 on the head and laughed. Where's my reward? You have to give it to me. Mr. Gohan, why can't you understand what my Hina-chan is saying? Tomono Kakaze said angrily. You've made such a big mess that all the information about the entire Wuhan Top Searcher dungeon has been deleted. Hina-chan has already been very kind to you by not asking for compensation. How can you still have the cheek to ask for her reward? In fact, Gohan really did not care about these rewards. As his strength continued to increase in real life, the rewards in the game had become dispensable. Other than the Jiansu oral solution, everything else in the game had become unnecessary to Gohan. Moreover, Gohan's main goal in entering the dungeon this time was to let Liu Lei know about him through the system-wide broadcast. This main goal had been achieved. In fact, it was more than achieved. Gohan's goal had actually been achieved by creating such a big news that the dungeon had been deleted. However, it seemed that Gohan did not intend to let go of Tomono Kakaze and give up on his reward. He held 0791's little hand and said, Hina-chan, it's true that I triggered the bug. However, you have to understand that triggering and creating are two different things. Your bug has always been there. What does it have to do with me? I'm not the one who created it. This time, I strictly followed your dungeon's procedures. Could it be that your dungeon has a rule that players can't achieve a perfect result? Can't we clear the dungeon as soon as possible? Or is there a rule that we can't fight monsters during the dungeon's countdown? Gohan said with a smile, Nina-chan, show me any one of these rules, and I'll shut up immediately. I won't ask for the reward that I deserve anymore. Well, Gohan's words were reasonable and convincing. This was the truth. Although the anomaly was caused by Gohan, Gohan did indeed strictly follow the dungeon's rules. He did not deliberately use this kind of bug that harmed others without benefiting himself. Naturally, Gohan's reward should not be taken away. However, Hina-chan would not agree to Gohan's request no matter what. The two of them pushed and pulled each other for a while. Gohan, you rascal! 0791 was on the verge of tears. All the information is gone. If I don't have your dungeon clearing record, even if I'm the system, I can't give you the reward. This is against the system's principles. If I do it, my core program will crash again. I see. Hearing Hina-chan's words, Gohan did not ask for the reward anymore. However, Gohan had already achieved his goal. So, Gohan took the opportunity and said, How about this, you answer a question of mine in place of the reward. Answering my question won't go against your core program and make you crash. Okay. It seemed that Tomono Kakaze was also forced by Gohan. She could only nod in agreement. What question do you want to ask? Let me make this clear. I can't answer any SSS level and above secret. Why don't you go find Xian? It's simple. Tell me, where can I find severed black hair? Gohan finally asked the question he wanted to know the most. Severed black hair? What do you want that for? Aren't your sword maidens the best in the world? Tomono Kakaze muttered. Oh right, didn't your good friend Bright Moon have a severed black hair? If you want it, just ask her. She'll definitely give it to you. No, Hina-chan, you're mistaken. I'm not asking where can I find severed black hair in the game. I'm asking you, where can I find severed black hair in real life? Gohan had a gentle smile on his face. You're in charge of all the sword-bearers' battle reports. You must know that some sword-bearers have obtained something as precious as severed black hair. Gohan, what happened to you in real life? Could it be that the battle at Yuzhong City caused your sword maiden to break, and you have to remove the sword scar in your body? Takafusa Tomonaga asked in surprise. Fine, I'll be honest with you. I don't want to hide it from you. Gohan sighed. He didn't hesitate at all and confidently told her his true purpose. During the battle at Yuzhong City, I had no choice but to synchronize with a famous sword maiden. However, I've already promised to be with King Yu in real life. I must use severed black hair to synchronize with King Yu. Do you understand? Tisk tsk, I didn't expect Mr. Gohan to be so infatuated. 0791 smacked her lip. But Mr. Solitary Frost, don't you think this is unfair to your famous sword maiden? After all, she saved Yuzhong City in a time of crisis. She can be considered a great hero of Yuzhong City. Don't worry about that. She doesn't have a deep relationship with me. There will be a better sword-bearer to be with her in the future, Gohan said calmly. All right, in that case, I'll tell you what I know about severed black hair. Tamono Kakashi finally compromised. As far as I know, in the past few centuries, 5 severed black hair have fallen into the hands of humans. 2 of them are in the hands of the Leonian family. I don't know who has the other 2. Only one of them is in the hands of the Sword Committee in Moscow. Just a few days ago, their chairman took out severed black hair. There's no mistaking it in their hands. Don't even think about the one in the Leonian family. Unless you become Jindy and the Leonian family doesn't have a sword immortal, you might be able to enter. Otherwise, you won't even be able to enter the Leonian family. The only one you can hope for is the one in Moscow. If you want it, you'll have to go to Moscow Bay City. Oh right, they have something interesting there. If you use that thing, you might really be able to get your hands on severed black hair. Moscow Bay City? Gohan thought to himself. When Yuzhong City was attacked, Moscow Bay City was also attacked. He didn't know how Moscow Bay City was doing under the threat of the invasion. Gohan wanted to look for Tamono Kakashi to ask about the situation in Moscow Bay City. However, he realized that he had already left the Instance Dungeon Service Center and reappeared on the streets of Yuzhong City in the game. At this time, notifications kept ringing in Gohan's ears. In the blink of an eye, there were thousands of reward records popping up. Looking at the time, he saw that they had been rewarded within the last 10 minutes. After hearing the system notification, people kept rewarding him for his previous guide posts. Hey, are they crazy? I've already destroyed an instance dungeon. Why are they still rewarding me? Gohan blushed when he saw the enthusiastic rewards. If only the readers of Chidian were like these players. Chapter 587. Gohan stood on the street for a while, and suddenly realized that he didn't know what to do. He originally wanted to run the instance dungeon for a while, but when he thought about the rewards Gohan received, he became a little dispirited. After thinking for a while, he decided to go home and spend some time with the King of Yu. At that moment, a system prompt suddenly appeared in Gohan's communicator. System prompt: today is the last day to register for the 8-city sword duel. You haven't registered yet. Are you sure you want to give up on this time's 8-city sword duel? When he saw this system prompt, Gohan remembered that he seemed to have forgotten the most important thing. He actually hadn't registered for the 8-city sword duel. There was nothing much to say. What Gohan needed to do now was to register for the Baoqing sword duel. The registration point for the 8-city sword duel was in the center of Yuzhong City. It was also the location of the sky covering Jindy statue. There were 50 tables there, and they were all NPCs in charge of registration. It was said that during the first few days of registration for the 8-city sword duel, the tables were surrounded by people who came to register. The queue could be more than 10 kilometers away. This showed the popularity of the registration. However, now that it was nearing the end, the people who needed to register had already registered. There were only a few people left. Gohan didn't even need to queue. He directly found an NPC and began to register. "Player, please show your name," the NPC said coldly. This made Gohan very confused. "Don't you NPCs know what my name is? Why do I need to show my name? Isn't this a waste of time?" However, since the NPC made this request, Gohan couldn't do anything to her. He quickly showed his name for less than 2 seconds and then put it back. He looked around and saw that no one was paying attention to his name. This made Gohan sigh in relief. With his current fame, if he was discovered by the crowd, he would probably have to immediately quit the game to avoid the surging crowd. Dear player, military governor, you are a sword wielder and will participate in the sword duel in the 8th-city sword duel. If you are close to the threshold of famed sword, you can wait until you become a famed sword wielder before registering to join the famed sword group, the NPC said. Gohan looked at the time. There was less than an hour left until the end of the day. Gohan's sword essence was a little short of 9,000 quarks. It was not at the threshold of 10,000 quarks at all. It was impossible for him to increase his sword essence by 1,000 quarks in an hour. Moreover, the sword duel in the 8th-city sword duel had always been known as a card rank. For example, a sword wielder who had already reached 50,000 quarks could clearly try to synchronize with a famed sword wielder to participate in the famed sword group. However, he refused to synchronize with a famed sword lady and stayed in the sword duel group. The reason was very simple. If a sword essence of 50,000 quarks went to the famed sword group, he would be bullied. Famed sword wielder with 80,000 to 90,000 quarks were a dime a dozen, and famed sword wielder with hundreds of thousands of quarks were not unheard of. It was unknown whether he would be able to make it to the top 10,000. However, if he stayed in the sword duel group, with 50,000 quarks of sword essence, he might be able to compete for the top 10 in the healthcare group. This was similar to a certain journey to the West game before the apocalypse. A large number of people were stuck at level 69, 89, and 119, but they did not level up. They accumulated hundreds of billions of experience points, but they still did not level up. They stayed at level 69 for the rest of their lives, all for the sake of the martial arts tournament. Later on, the system discovered this flaw and increased the level of the reward. Even the reward for the first place in the sword duel group was not as high as the reward for the first place in the famed sword group. However, it still could not stop this kind of behavior. Who would care about a little reward? Between the first place in the sword duel group and the first place in the famed sword group, everyone knew which one was more tempting. In the previous sword duel in the 8th-city sword duel, the ancient sword group, the famed sword group, and the spiritual sword group, these 4 groups of sword wielder were all dominated by the card rank. Occasionally, there would be a few talented and outstanding new players who broke the monopoly of the card ranks, but they were only a minority. As a result, it became a cancer that many players hated. Unfortunately, the game had never thought of a good way to deal with them. After all, they used the excuse that they could not find a sword maiden who could synchronize with them. They could not let the system put all the high-level sword maidens in front of them and force them to synchronize with them one by one, right? Therefore, for the majority of players, if they had not stopped at the sword duel group for a long time and had tens of thousands of quarks of sword essence, the best choice was to stay at the sword duel group and fight for the reputation of the top few. If they had just reached 10,000 quarks of sword essence, then they should not stay. They should desperately look for the token and strive to become a famed sword group sword wielder. After all, the reward for the famed sword group was much more generous than the treasured sword group. Next, Gohan confirmed with the NPC that he would be joining the treasured sword group. At the same time, he received a number plate with the number 584755623. Gohan had completed the registration for the sword duel in the 8th-city sword duel. It was quite fast. Remember, if you become a famed sword group sword wielder after the registration, you are prohibited from using a famed sword group's sword maiden in the competition. This was the last message left by the NPC. Chairman, all areas in the core area have completed the second cleanup. 99% of Yuan-Ko has been cleared. Even if 1 or 2 escaped occasionally, our emergency response team will deal with them. In the temporary Sword Bearers Service Center in the common area, several officials of the Sword Committee were reporting to Lu Lei. More than half of these officials were new faces. Most of the original old faces had died in the Sword Bearers Service Center. Only a small number of lucky people survived. Lu Lei had no choice but to directly promote these lucky people to leaders. Then, he brought some new people to reorganize the operation of the entire Sword Committee. However, this also proved that war was the fastest way to get promoted. First, it was easy to make contributions. Second, it was easier for your leaders and competitors to die. Of course, it was also easier for you to die. However, the efficiency of this Sword Committee had naturally decreased by a lot. It was not as convenient as it had been in the past. It took them 10 days to complete the task of clearing out the Yuan Shun, and only 99% of it was completed. There was still about 1% of the Yuan Shun that could not be found. If this had happened in the past, Lu Lei would have cursed. Is there anything else that I need to deal with? Lu Lei touched his eyes. He had not closed his eyes for 3 days. Even if he was a fairy sword-level sword wielder, he was a little overwhelmed in the face of such intense work. If there is nothing that I need to decide, I will go to sleep for a while. There are 2 more things. The staff handed out a document. First, the temporary committee has approved the draft of the core area population replenishment plan. As long as you sign it, this plan can enter the committee's daily review process and begin discussion. Approved. Lu Lei waved his pen. This draft was originally drawn up by him with a few spirit sword-level sword wielder. Naturally, there was no reason not to approve it. What's the second matter? The second matter is a civil dispute. The staff hesitated for a moment. There is a family member of a dead civilian who kneels at the entrance of our temporary swordsman service center every day. They said that their family member was killed by the sword wielder for no reason and was cruelly beheaded in public. They hope that we can seek justice for them. Originally, there was no need to disturb you, but they kneeled there every day. The news has spread far and wide. There is a lot of discussion in the city. The TV station has also recorded an interview and will be broadcasting it tomorrow. Therefore, they are asking for your opinion on how to deal with this matter. This is outrageous. Capture that sword wielder for me and hand him over to the commission for discipline inspection. Deal with him severely. We can't let such a black sheep stay here. What does he want to do by beheading ordinary people in public? Is he trying to stir up chaos among the sword wielder and ordinary people? We are already in a mess now, and this kind of thing actually happened. Lu Lei scolded. But, hearing Lu Lei's words, the staff hesitated even more. But what? Don't finish your sentence, do you hear me? Lu Lei said angrily. But we don't know if the sword wielder is dead or alive. We can't catch him even if we want to. The staff looked at Lu Lei's eyes. And this person appears on TV 30 times a day. We really don't know how to deal with this matter. Hearing the staff say this, Lu Lei, who was originally furious, immediately shut his mouth. After a while, he asked, "Are you talking about Gohan?" "Yes, Sir Gohan." The staff nodded helplessly. "Impossible. Gohan is the hero who saved our Yuzhong city. He saved our entire city. How could he do such a thing? Tell me the details of this matter. What is going on?" Lu Lei said agitatedly. He didn't mention any punishment. So, the staff told him about how the old man stopped them from borrowing the bus, hugged Gohan's thigh, and forced Gohan to be beheaded. Sigh, this child has suffered. For Yuzhong City, he's willing to bear this kind of infamy. What a good child. After listening to the whole story, Gohan instantly became a good child. He was no longer the unreasonable black sheep. Go and drag those troublemakers home. No, since they dared to kneel in front of me, they definitely can't be persuaded. Give them a sum of money to shut their mouth. Then tell the TV station to ban all documentaries and news from broadcasting them. F***CK. What are these bastards at the TV station trying to do? Are they trying to stir up chaos between the sword wielder and ordinary people? Alright, you can go. I'm tired. Let me rest for a while. When the staff left, Lu Lei, who was very tired, was about to go to bed. However, he unexpectedly turned on his computer. The icon of the forum of Sword Maiden Online was constantly flashing on the computer desktop. This meant that a very hot piece of news had happened in the forum. What happened? Lu Lei clicked on the news curiously. Then, he stood up instantly. His eyes were full of excitement, and there was no sign of fatigue in them at all. Chapter 588. Although everything seemed to be going according to Gohan's plan, at the last step, there seemed to be a small deviation. Because Gohan and Lu Lei were not friends, Lu Lei had to first send a friend request to Gohan before he could communicate with Gohan. There were new problems. Originally, Gohan's communication was set to not be added. In the end, when Gohan changed back to accepting friend requests, a huge string of thousands of friend requests swarmed him, and the number was increasing by dozens every minute. Just looking at these constantly jumping names gave Gohan a headache. What was more frightening was that Gohan had to distinguish which of these friend requests belonged to Lu Lei. Students who had played online games should know that no matter how powerful an online game was, there was no intelligent processing system for friend requests. At most, it would give you the ability to reject all or add all at once. Who would have thought that a person could face thousands of friend requests at once? Helpless, Gohan, who had returned home, could only start manually checking these friend requests one by one. Fortunately, the friend request could show the applicant's gender and the level of the swordsman, which made Gohan's checking a lot easier. First of all, Gohan directly rejected all the female requests. Of course, Lu Lei would not play as a female, right? Even if he wanted to play, the system would not give him the chance to be a ladyboy. Next, Gohan also eliminated the swordsman below the level of famous swords. Lu Lei had once said that he loved to play games. Based on his age, he had at least stayed in the game for more than 50 years. If Lu Lei still could not reach the level of a famous swordsman by this time, then Lu Lei could go and die. Of course, this did not eliminate the possibility that Lu Lei did not have much time to play games because he was too busy fighting. That was why Gohan set the lower limit as a famous swordsman. If Lu Lei was really so bad that he was only at the level of a treasured swordsman, then Gohan could only accept his fate. Therefore, as long as the applicant was female or below the level of a famed sword, Gohan would directly click the reject button and reject them. More than 80% of the applications were excluded, so Gohan was not slow in processing these applications. He directly rejected them and added them as temporary friends when he found those that met the conditions. Temporary friends were temporary friends that could only be communicated through text messages and were not allowed to talk to each other directly. Gohan sent a message to all of his friends with the number 26 written on it. If Lu Lei saw this message, he would definitely understand the meaning of the number 26 and give the correct answer. If the person on the other side was not Lu Lei, then he would not understand and would not know what was going on. Soon, all kinds of information came back. Those players didn't know what Gohan's 26 meant, so they started to imagine and came up with all kinds of strange answers. Do I have to be younger than 26? Can I be a little older than 26? Did this person think that 26 meant age? At least he was somewhat reliable. Brother Military Governor, let's go for the big sword for $26. Are you sure you can get the big sword for $26? Are you talking about a 62-year-old auntie? My sword lady is the 26th rank spiritual sword, the Golden Thunder Sword. This answer was really shocking. Brother, Big Brother has already prepared 26 girls for you. A super large private room on the 3rd floor of Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion. Let's have fun together. Ahem, should I add him as a friend first and contact him later? The above were all weird replies, but the one that made Gohan feel like he had won the game was a reply from a nouveau riche. Brother 2. 6 million renminbi has been rewarded. Asking for a friend. Seeing this reply, Gohan was stunned for a while, Then he checked the reward records just now and saw a huge reward of 2.6 million renminbi. It was hard for Gohan to reject such a nouveau riche. After all, he had spent 2.6 million renminbi. How could Gohan reject him? Anyway, it wasn't a big deal to have another friend in the friend list, so Gohan added this nouveau riche to his friend list. Boss Military Governor, can we talk for a while? I have something important to tell you. This nouveau riche quickly sent such a message. Gohan smiled bitterly and could only reply, I'm looking for someone now. I don't have time. Come to me tomorrow. After about half an hour, Gohan finally saw the answer he wanted to see in a reply. The 26th Sword Pavilion Master of Yuzhong City. My good disciple. That's right, this person was undoubtedly Lu Lei. Apart from him, only a few high-level sword holders knew that Gohan had become the 26th Sword Pavilion Master of Yuzhong City, not to mention that he had added a good disciple at the end. But why did this person's name sound so annoying? Loneliness doesn't understand brothers' loneliness. Seeing this name, Gohan couldn't help but think of a certain punk aristocrat with a cigarette in his mouth, hair sticking up like a hedgehog, and the corners of his eyes showing 180 degrees of sadness. Was this really the game name of the dignified supreme person of Yuzhong City, one of the peak existences of mankind, Cloudy Sword Celestial Lu Lei? Fortunately, when Lu Lei connected to Gohan, Gohan completely confirmed Lu Lei's identity. Good disciple, are you okay? Lu Lei's concern made Gohan's nose sour, and he suddenly had an urge to cry. There was one more person in this world who really cared about him. It's me. Master, I've made you worry. Gohan said apologetically, Master, it's not convenient to talk over the phone. Please come to my house. After saying that, Gohan sent an invitation to Lu Lei. After a while, a space door was torn open in front of Gohan's house, and Lu Lei strode in with great spirits. Good disciple, this is your house. Not bad. Lu Lei looked left and right, knocking on Gohan's house thoroughly, and then sat down with Gohan in the living room. The NPC maidservant served Lu Lei some fragrant tea. After taking a sip, Lu Lei placed the teacup on the table. He stared at Gohan for a moment, then sighed and asked, Tell me, what's going on with you right now? Why won't you come out when I'm looking for you? Why must you seduce me in the game? The word seduce shouldn't be used in this situation, Gohan complained in his heart. Master, to tell you the truth, I was heavily injured in that battle, and I only woke up yesterday. My personal terminal was damaged in the battle, and I can't contact you directly. That's why I'm looking for you in the game, Gohan explained. Nonsense. Lu Lei slammed the table. Right now, the TV station is broadcasting your missing person notice 30 times a day. You just have to find someone and ask them to help you contact the Swordsman Service Center. Why do you have to go through so much trouble in the game? If I hadn't looked at the forum on a whim today, I would be sleeping soundly by now. Who would have the time to care about you? Forgive me, Master. Gohan stood up and bowed to Lu Lei, apologizing. Master, your disciple's body is a little strange now. I don't want to come out and face everyone, so I can only trouble you in the game. Strange? Have your injuries not healed yet? No, injuries aren't enough for you to hide. Could it be that you're disfigured? Is that why you don't want to come out and face us? Lu Lei was a little anxious when he heard Gohan's words. You stupid disciple, you're usually quite smart. Why are you so stupid now? If you're disfigured, all the more you should come out and find me. I'll return you your original appearance even if I have to use all the power in Yuzhong City. How am I disfigured? I've actually become more beautiful than before. No, how can I use the word beautiful to describe myself? Gohan didn't even know how to criticize himself. He could only smile bitterly. Master, please don't ask. I have my own difficulties, but I promise you that this oddity will heal on its own after a certain period of time. When the time comes, I'll come and ask for forgiveness from Master in person. What's so strange? Why are you so secretive? You don't even want to tell me. Lu Lei whispered. Kid, don't tell me you've become a woman. Lu Lei was just casually complaining, but he didn't know that he had hit the bull SI. It scared Gohan so much that he broke out in a cold sweat. Good disciple, it's fine if you don't want to come out and meet people, but I have something to ask you. Did you take away all the natural sword ladies in Yuzhong City's sword tower? Lu Lei's face was filled with anticipation, confusion, and fear. These were the doubts that had shrouded his mind for the past 10 days. Were those natural sword ladies in Gohan's hands? Would it disappear forever with the disappearance of the solid cold? If so, then Yuzhong City's sword tower would lose all its natural sword ladies, and there would be no need for Yuzhong Base City to continue existing. He, Lu Lei, would have to die to thank all the ancestors and sages of Yuzhong City. They're with me. That's why I was in such a hurry to find you, Master. Gohan's words made Lu Lei feel much more relaxed. I was afraid that Yuan Ko would break into the sword tower and destroy our natural sword ladies, so I took them with me. I didn't expect such a huge change to happen, so I had to keep them with me. Sorry for making you worry. That's good. That's good. Lu Lei's face was full of smiles. But disciple, I can't keep these natural sword ladies with you. How about this? I'll send someone to find you. No, I'll go find you myself. Just give me the natural sword ladies. No. Gohan shook his head. Please forgive me, Master. I can't see you. Then, find someone you trust and ask him to send the sword ladies to the Sword Bearers Service Center. Master, I don't have anyone I can trust. Then what do you want? Lu Lei was a little unhappy when he heard this. This Gohan, he still dared to be arrogant. Master, please wait at the Sword Bearers Service Center tomorrow afternoon. I'll tell you where to go, Gohan said apologetically. Sigh, it was such a simple matter, but he made it sound like a meeting between kidnappers. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.